Read at least. Okay. Read a couple books. One of them is Landlording for Dummies, How to Be a Landlord, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. And write down your top 10 criteria and don't bend from it. Don't listen to sob stories, don't bend from it, and stick to your guns. Pretty good advice, I think. Tenants can still be a hassle. Leasehold estates. We know that it is less than freehold. Remember freehold versus leasehold? Freehold is the grand poopah. You own it outright in a fee simple estate. Estates can be, you have an estate if you have a leasehold estate because you have a lot of rights, but you don't own the property, at least not the property underneath the house. So tenant's right to possess real estate for the term of the lease is called a leasehold estate. A leasehold is actually considered personal property, and there's 4 main types of leasehold estate. An estate for years, remember, has a beginning and end date. Specifically, it starts whatever, October 1st and ends October 31st. You don't need to, hold on a second, because I'm unfocused. Focus. You don't need to give notice, sorry, to move out. It's very clear that you VRBO'd for this house, and it says 2 o'clock on October 31st, and that's when you have to be out. It could be for a week. It could be an Airbnb for the weekend in McCall on the Lake. Estate for years just has a beginning and end date, and you don't have to give notice. An estate from period to period is just that again. It's a specific period. You probably have to give notice, whatever is intended in the lease itself. And sometimes it can be extended at with 30 days notice. I'm going to stay another month. At will and sufferance. At will is they're staying beyond the terms of the lease, but they're not at sufferance. At sufferance is blanks here. Sufferance is just that somebody's suffering. To me, that leads me to believe somebody is squatting. All right. Okay. So tenancy for years. I'm just going down on page 138. I think I went through that. Just don't forget that a tenancy for years doesn't have to be for years. It could be for a week. Period to period. One thing unique about it is it automatically renews itself. I would absolutely want to see that in writing. The payment and acceptance of the rent extends the lease for another period. Proper notice must be given to terminate it. At will, I think that would be a little bit more of a loosey-goosey type thing. Mom to a kid or something like that, or I don't know, I wouldn't do that with friends, but it's always more informal than an actual valid written lease. It could be oral, and I think I've hammered into it enough that if it's for more than 1 year, it has to be in writing in the state of Idaho to be enforceable in court. I mean, if you want to give hugs and handshakes and say, I love you, that's fine. You do what you want to do. I just don't highly recommend it. That's all. They have an example, an agreement to let a friend live in your guest house for as long as they need. I'm not going to comment on that. And again, a sufferance is squatters. Alrighty. It's going to be without the consent of the landlord. And they don't move out when the lease is up, okay, for whatever reason. We are very fortunate in the state of Idaho. The law tends to side a lot more with the landlord than in other states. And we can evict people pretty quickly for non-payment of rent anyway. All right, lease agreements. In Idaho, a lease for more than 1 year must be in writing. I've probably said that a gajillion times. I think that's through your head, right? Idaho recognizes oral leases for less than 1 year as long as the party agree to all terms. Best practice is get it in writing. It says avoid the he said, she said situation. I can't imagine doing that for anything almost. Anyway, lease agreement terms must have the name, address, and contact information of the landlord, the tenant, an emergency contact for the tenant, and maintenance and after hours. It's got to have some kind of, if it's this, if it's that hour, you call him, her, whatever. Sometimes it is just the landlord at all times of the day, unless it's managed by a company. It should always has to have the rent, the day it's due, and the disclosure of fees, like when it becomes late and what the late charge is if you can't pay your rent on time. How and when a landlord can enter a property. I know that there's something here I wanted to tell you, just a second. Maybe not. Well, how and when, it's a little bit vague. I can see that in this, but I want to just say how and when the landlord can enter the property. Idaho law is silent on that. I have seen leases that basically say something to the effect of, obviously, if you put a notice on the door and you can't get anybody to answer, you call, they haven't paid rent, or you have, quote, reason to believe the property is being damaged, is generally what it says, something like that, but that should be in the lease too. The beginning and ending dates, the amount of the security deposit and how it will be used, who pays what, the responsible party for each of the utilities for indoor and outdoor maintenance and repair of the property include garages, carports, and storage facilities. Utilities and maintenance, that's pretty obvious. I'll pay the water, garbage, sewer, you pay the gas and electric. Who's going to mow the lawn? I have found that reducing the rent and letting the tenants take care of the lawn, it tends to not look that great. I think that probably needs to be a little bit more specific in there. Needs to be mowed every umpteen days. Weeds need to be declared out, especially if there's a homeowners association, you're gonna get fined. And if the landlord is not happy with the way you are doing it, we will raise the rent and hire a professional. That's kind of what the gist of what I like to see in there. And then of course the signatures and date. All restrictions would be the number of occupants, whether pets or smoking are allowed. Mandatory quiet times, whether an assignment or subletting is permitted. Remember, an assignment is you move out and basically you don't tell the landlord and you re-rent it on your own. And whatever, it's kind of kooky. That happened to me once. And I hated my tenant and I was trying to evict her anyway. And all of a sudden the rent checks started coming on time. She moved out and she'd re-rented it. And I was a little shocked when I found out, but I was thrilled because this guy paid the rent. So, I mean, whatever. Is it legal? No. But it worked out pretty well. So assignment is assigning a current tenant's interest and control to a new tenant, and subletting is when a new tenant takes over, but the old tenant is still liable. They might have some kind of a clause in there. I mean, what if you got a job transfer? And quite frankly, if it was a grossly appreciating rental market, I would say, fine, I can re-rent it for $200 more a month. But if you found it, I would want to meet that person and cancel your lease probably and reassign it. Fair housing and civil rights laws, which is actually the chapter after this anyway. That'll get you really going on Saturday afternoon, get your blood flowing thin. Fair housing and civil rights law protects tenants from discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, familial status, disability, or national origin. Those are called protected classes. So when we are trying to decipher if somebody is breaking federal fair housing laws, you have to ask yourself, is that a protected class? It has to be one of those. You can't say, I'm discriminating against you because you're an attorney. That's not a protected class. It has to be one of those. The lessors cannot segregate individuals in sections of a complex, must allow people with disabilities to alter the premises at the least seats, the tenant expense within reason. But in there, if it says it wants to build a ramp for a wheelchair or something like that, it also has to say must return the premises to their original condition when the property is vacated. Cannot charge different amounts of rent or security deposit. That doesn't mean that you can't up the rent 3 months later to somebody else and keep the rent a little bit lower for a long-term tenant. It means you can't discriminate based on protected classes. Okay, can't be different because of one's a Canadian, and that is national origin. Believe it or not, Canadians are protected. Sorry. Um,
Even Canadians.
well, national origin is a protected class. I don't know. Anyway, Idaho
I
code
always
requires
charge Canadians more.
to
Just
provide
kidding.
written
I'm just kidding.
notification 15 days prior if there'll be any changes to the lease agreement. And of course, the signatures and dates of all parties. Lease option. The lease option, now we are getting back to the buyer wants to buy the house, doesn't have any money for some particular reason. Some of them are valid reasons, some of them are stupid, and I wouldn't let it go through. It depends on what it is, guys and gals. I'm blank again, sorry. What were some of the examples I used a little bit earlier? I don't want to make it contingent on the sale of another house, but I can't close until that house closes. So I want to move in and I want to pay $2,000 a month. And this is the amount that I'm going to pay for your house at the end of 3 months. This is the end at 6 months, and this is the end at 9 months. It behooves me to get my house sold as quickly as possible. So obviously a little pressure on me to not have to go the 9-month route. And it's also in a substantial non-refundable option money. Whose option is it? Subtle hint.
Buyer's option.
It's the buyer's option. Remember, the seller is bound. If you agree to all this and it's 8 months down the road and you change your mind, too bad. Because the buyer still has 1 month to either perform on that option or not perform, and in which case you keep the non-refundable option money. It says real estate licensees must help the parties set them up correctly. Please ask for help on that one. Okay. One little undotted I really changes the terms. An awful lot of agents don't seem to understand the value of option money. And without it, why don't I just rent my house out? Why am I going to be bound to this great contract if you're gonna move out in 9 months and just leave? Where does that get me in a downward market? It's kind of a bad situation to be in. So I want you really serious. Otherwise, I'm just going to rent it. And a lot of agents just don't understand the value of that. But whatever. Execute the offer to purchase and lease at the same time. Hammer out all the terms and conditions up front. This is above and beyond a new realtor. I know I'm hammering that totally. So please get help. The lease is the primary consideration. The option is a second thought, and get a non-refundable security deposit that credits the buyer at closing. That's fine. They get it. Of course they get it. If they exercise their option and close on the property, and if they don't, it would be awarded to the seller in that case. Types of leases that we can do. A gross lease is most often residential. Basically, it's a contract that says, I'm hereby leasing the property to you, my name, legal description, property address. It's going to be for $1,200 a month, and it starts on October the 1st, and it ends September the 30th, 2023. I'm going to pay the water, garbage, sewer. You're responsible for, I don't know, you get the gist of it. That is pretty much what a residential lease. I think most of us at some point or another have probably signed a residential lease. If it was more than 20 years ago, I know they're much more litigious now. But the tenant pays a fixed rental income every single month for the term of that lease. The landlord pays all the property charges such as taxes, insurance, and maintenance. A net lease, it's leaning a little bit towards what might be considered commercial. The tenant is still going to pay a fixed rental amount, and some of the property charges, it says in their utilities, well, maybe the tenant is paying the water, garbage, sewer, which is usually, I don't know, maybe I was going to say more than half the time the landlord pays that. But what if the tenant had to pay the taxes or the property insurance? Generally, the tenant just pays rental insurance on the contract.
That'd be triple net.
But we're not there yet. Okay.
Okay.
We're not quite there yet. Sorry. I'm still on a net lease that could be residential. So I'm just gonna say the tenant pays a fixed amount and water, garbage, sewer, Idaho Power, Intermountain Gas, and property insurance, taxes or something weird. You don't see that very often in a residential. That's why we're leaning towards commercial, which is generally a triple net lease. I've never done a commercial rental other than me as the tenant owned one that I wanted. And that is where the tenant pays a fixed rental income and all of the property charges, and that could also be the maintenance and repairs. Be very careful when you sign that lease. I didn't fully understand that it meant repairing the roof on a building I rented for 2 years. It wasn't that big a deal because it was only $500 or $600. It was putting bubble gum in holes basically, and that's how much I did it. But that was my first exposure to it, and I guess I didn't understand it completely when I signed the lease. But a triple net is going to be leaning definitely towards commercial. I've never seen it in residential. Okay. Percentage lease is the tenant pays a fixed amount of rent plus a percentage of the gross income. Why do I think we already did this? We did something like this, didn't we, already last
Yeah, we
weekend? But well, we're doing it again, I guess. That's kind of bizarre. Must have been in another section. So anyway, percentage lease, remember it would be like in a shopping center or something like that. Your rent is $1,200 a month plus a certain percentage of the either gross or net income for the previous month, whatever it says. And that is why when you have a lot of money, January 1st, because of Christmas, you're going to pay more January 1st than you will December the 1st. Okay. Think shopping center. Variable lease provides for increases in rent during the lease period. That's generally going to be, variable is going to be either graduated or indexed, and it's going to be set in future dates. It's for a longer term lease. It wouldn't be like for a month or two, but let's just say that it's a 3-year lease. This is the rent in year 1. This is the rent in year 2. This is the rent in year 3. What if the market crashes and everything's awry? I suppose you could argue it if you were the tenant with the landlord and agreed to redo it or whatever, but that is the way it goes, and that's a variable lease. In an index lease, it's going to rent, it goes according to the consumer price index, a little bit closer to keeping up with inflation and more often in commercial properties. It's just going to change. Manufactured homes and houseboats. I want to tell you something about HIS. It is that they both require written leases. That's fine. Increases due to property charges require a 30-day notice, and rent increase is a 98-day notice. We did go through this, and I'm not sure why they're intertwining, but they are. They automatically renew unless otherwise notified. Why is it a 90-day notice for a rent increase? They are assuming that it's harder for you to find another property to rent. As far as a houseboat, I think the state of Idaho has 15 of them on Coeur d'Alene. So I would have to say, unless you own it, you're not the SOL. There's not going to be another one to rent anyway, but I'm just kind of telling you the gist of it. A ground lease, separate ownership of land and building, allows the tenant to construct a building on land that the tenant does not own. All right, I know I did talk about that, and in a commercial lease, you wouldn't really care because it's for 99 years and you are building a warehouse. What do you care, right? Their example is cottage site transactions in McCall. Process began in 2010 in this plan. I know what they're talking about. To continue through 2024, offers the lessees in good standing to purchase the land underneath their improvements. I don't know how many of you know this, but obviously Payette Lake and McCall is a heavy tourist destination. Up until 2009, a tremendous amount of the cabins all around the lake and on the water were Forest Service leases, and a lot of them were 99 years. But unfortunately, Grandma and Grandpa signed the lease in 1950. So what are we coming up on towards the end of the lease? And if it was 70 years, then it just expired, didn't it, 2 years ago? A tremendous amount of people lost their cabins because of this. But the truth of the matter is, I don't care if it was 50, 60, 70, or 90 years, at the end of the lease, the lessor, in which case was the government, has the right to take the property, period. And you've known that all along. Now, they did offer, the leases to purchase land underneath their house for a certain price. I know that the prices are so high around the lake that a lot of people just couldn't afford it and had to let it go back. That's what happens when you don't own the land underneath your house. Um, in Blaine County, there is was a large ranch called the Board Ranch, BOARD. And actually, it was the Board family who developed the whole thing in the 40s, I think, or 50s or something like that. Anyway, there's about 400 houses out there that are on leased land. And when I first started selling real estate there, you'd go 1 mile from the base of the ski lifts one direction and the house is 350, and 1 mile the other direction at 700. Why? Because one is fee simple land and one is on a leasehold. And these leases were starting to get down below the 20-year mark. Would you buy a house with 12 years left on a lease if you're 40 and just starting a family? No, I wouldn't. It's a big gamble for me. But I explained it to my clients, and there's people out there that were willing to risk $300,000 or $400,000, thinking that that could happen at the end of the lease term, and they were willing to do that. They won big, big, big time. The Board family, which was now the great grandchildren, it's always the descendants. For those of you who haven't seen the movie with George Clooney called The Descendants, it's a perfect example of what happens. One of you grew up in Hawaii. I can't remember who. Nampa Drew, right. So did you see the movie by chance?
No, I don't think so.
Great movie. I know it was Hollywood. I know it was George Clooney. But the truth of the matter is how did 7 Howleys end up with 25,000 acres on the coast of Kauai? Because the great-great-grandchildren of King Kamehameha intermarried with the great-great-grandchildren of the missionaries, and that's how the whole thing happened. Fast forward to when that movie was made, which was, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, and the descendants, the trust was expiring, the descendants, I mean, can you imagine what 25,000 acres on the coast? I mean, the Marriotts and the Hiltons and everybody was screaming for billions of dollars, and there's 7 heirs to that. And 6 of them wanted to sell and 1 didn't. And that is what happened all this time later. What happened out in Sun Valley on the Board Ranch was the Board family, which was the great-great-grandchildren again. They were very, very wealthy, if you wanted to call their land holdings, but they didn't have any cash, and they knew that inheritance was coming, and a lot of them didn't have any money, and they wanted to sell it. So it went to court before the expiration of the leases, and the judge ruled that the people, exactly what it says here, the lessees in good standing could purchase the land underneath, and if they did it within a certain amount of time, it was less than fair market value. So at the time, and this is 15 or 20 years ago, I think now, I think it was right around $100,000 when it should have gone for 150, and that was part of the deal to the Board family to get out of the leases right now. They had the option of purchasing it at definitely under market value. Where did they come up with 100 grand? Most of them had paid for the house by that point because there wasn't a lot of bank loans on houses where you didn't own the land. They didn't have private financing or something. They just took out a loan for 100,000, and now they own the land underneath, and now it doubled in value immediately. They did win. Looking back, do I wish I would have bought a cabin out there? Of course I do, but I don't have that kind of money to throw around and gamble $300,000 or $400,000. But the people who did won. It was actually a very cool thing in the end. So that is a ground lease. Remember, you don't always own the land underneath. If you do, it is fee simple. If it's not, it's leasehold interest. Okay. An oil and gas lease is just what it is. Receives cash. The owner receives cash for letting somebody come and drill, really. If oil or gas is found, the owner usually receives a percent of its value as royalty. Don't get all excited and go home and start drilling right now. If you look at your deed, it's probably been excluded somewhere along the lines, I would imagine, or there was none to begin with. I think I just got ahead of myself, didn't I? All right. Or maybe there's no slide on this. No, we're good. Anyway, I am a little bit ahead of myself. Let's look on the bottom of page 143. A lease purchase, you know, a tenant leases the property in advance of its purchase, usually for tax or financing reasons. Part of the rent can be applied toward the purchase price, not necessarily. The purchase is the primary consideration. The lease is secondary. I know I'm hammering this, but who is bound? The seller. Whose option is it? The buyer. If you don't understand what I just said, make a note of it and study it later. Sale and lease back, remember, is the owner sells the property, but for some reason wants to rent the property back. What they're doing is avoiding a double move generally when they're building a house or doing whatever they're doing. That is what I call the price of grief and aggravation. In a normal market, you're going to ask the new buyer, can you live there for another 3 or 4 months? While they own the property, you're probably going to get less for your house. $20,000 less. If you really don't want to move your family, what's it worth to you? I like moving out of one house, quite frankly. I prefer it. And that is also a good objection buster for those people that say, I don't want to have to move twice. Not so fast. You're going to find an awful lot of people in that situation. And the truth of the matter is, if you completely move out of one house, put everything in a pod storage, they take it to Podsville, wherever that is, usually climate controlled. I know that the one out by the Boise Airport is. And then go to a furnished VRBO for the summer with pools, for God's sakes, and relax. You just sold a house that's exhausting in and of itself, and then move into your new house in September and unpack everything and have the pod delivered. It's not that horrible. It actually can be a really nice way to stress of moving. Some people squawk at that. What if I can't find a rental place? Anyway, agricultural leases. I didn't mean to go and advance that. Sorry. Agriculture is just that. You can rent your farmland. Okay. Discharge, termination of a lease. That's where we are. You can give notice. Okay. Mutual agreement. I need to move out early. Is that okay with you? Good. I wanted to move back in. That works really well, doesn't it? I was actually getting ready to call my tenants in Seattle, and they were the best tenants I ever had in my whole life. But I wanted to sell the house, and they were on a month-to-month because they'd been there for 2 years. And I finally picked up the phone and said, I have some really bad news, you guys. I really want to put the house on the market, and I'll give you 2 months to find another one. They started laughing hysterically and said, Barb, they both work for Costco. We just took jobs in Kona. Can we leave in a month? I mean, sometimes, you know what? You never know until you ask. Sometimes it just works out. Expiration of the term. The lease is over and I don't want to renew it. Okay, breach. There's a couple things I want you to remember in breach. It outlines landlord remedies due to breach. Remember, breach is getting out of it without a legal reason to do so, like not paying rent. The landlord must give written notice. And I'm pretty sure that is a notice on the door and or a certified letter. If you need to delve further, it is in the Idaho book. Tenant has 3 days to cure the breach. What does that mean? Pay up, obviously. And the court date is set for no later than 12 calendar days. Yes, you're reading that right. From those of you from California, what is it, 1,200 years or something like that? I'm being a little
Never.
bit facetious.
Never.
Forever. Yeah, it never. It's just, it makes me nuts, makes me crazy. This is actually one of Idaho laws that I am just going, you've got to be kidding. This is the most fantastic in the whole wide world. The court date is set no later than 12 calendar days. The tenant must be informed 5 days prior to the trial, and a judgment is ordered. And believe you me, I have seen them go 14, 15 days, but there is a sheriff at the door telling the tenants to get out. I know you're going to say, well, I heard once that in Nampa this, and I know what happened. It was all over the news. I'm not an attorney. I don't have the intricacies. We don't need to talk about the exceptions. I'm telling you that Idaho actually is very generous to landlords. Let me see. The tenant remedies due to breach, file an action for damages or specific performance. Surrender and acceptance. That means that I want to move out because I do. And you accept it. It's almost the same as I can't think of the other term. Oh well. Yes, I'd like to move out, and that's totally fine. It's almost like mutual agreement, if you want to talk about that. Destruction of the property, of course, if there's no property left except ashes, does the tenant have to continue to pay rent? No. Merger, this is always a tricky question, you guys. What would a merger be that would make the lease go away, terminated?
Tenant and landlord get married?
Oh, I don't know if I would do that if I was the landlord. I would not let a future spouse own a dime of my property. Okay, that was different now. Rule number 822. How about the tenant buys the property? That terminates the lease. Okay, that was funny. As they get married, holy moly, I'm just gonna keep moving, guys. Sorry. An operation of law like bankruptcy and death of the parties. In all fairness, again, just like in a purchase and sale agreement, if the seller dies, there is legal recourse to the person living or the buyer. If the buyer dies, I know that I don't have to pay rent anymore. I could make a joke there, but that would be really rude, wouldn't it? Okay. Property management. Currently, Idaho does not regulate property management operations. Anybody want to do this? Or get into it, either personal or
Yeah,
excuse me,
there's property management companies here in Coeur d'Alene. Right next to real estate companies because they can operate with no license, obviously, and have a lot of
Yeah.
functions, you know, in the real estate space, and just, you know, help out tenants find rentals and get, you know, all those different things to build a clientele to manage property.
What is the real estate company?
There's one called just property management, like right there on
No, I
Sherman
meant-
and downtown Coeur d'Alene.
No, what, okay, I love that street. Which real estate company is right next to a property manager? Then they go back and forth. Do you know?
It's a vacation rental and real estate firm.
Oh, okay.
Vac-
It's not like it's
Yeah,
Cola Bank.
vacation
Right?
rental. Yeah, vacation rental authority.
Got it.
Mhm.
Actually, there's one like that in McCall too. I can't think of the name of it right now. It's not a half bad gig, guys and gals, because, and I know a lot of just independent realtors will also do property manager, because one does kind of feed off the other to a certain extent. That's the positive side, that you're gonna have tenants that want to buy a house, and that's a good way to market to tenants. You're gonna have more investors coming to you because you know more about the rental market that want to buy, and then you're gonna find the tenants for it. There's a lot of positives to it. The negative, I have found that people that try to do both are running around trying to find a plumber at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they're not lead generating for leads for real estate. It's actually, if you can manage both, that's great. If you have help, that would be even more great. But at a certain point, it's kind of like trying to work out of your area of expertise. There's a saying, correct me on this one, you guys, because I don't know it exactly. Jack of all trades, master of none, right? At what point are you pulling away from your income? And the answer is, I don't know. But I do know that if you're going to do both, you can get leads for each other for the other business. So let's talk about this agreement. Description of the property. Okay, now this is between a potential landlord and the property management company. It's a third party is what it is, of course. Description of the property, that's legal, and street address. The time period of the agreement. That means I am a landlord and I'm hiring you, property management company, to manage it because I don't want anything to do with it. You can send me the check, quite frankly. Definition of property manager's responsibilities. You know, with that anecdote, I was going to tell you that, you know, I, all the years that I motorhomed and snowbirded, I, VR and Airbnb might be my house, but I didn't do anything less than 30 days and I preferred 90. I had traveling nurses in there and I had Micron workers, and it was really a great deal, quite frankly. I ended up hiring a property manager because I just did not want to deal with the whole thing anymore. And it was probably the best money I think I've ever spent in my life. But that's when I was getting older. and spending more time down south. And, it's the same old thing. It's a grief and aggravation factor, right? I also found that I think they can get more money, and maybe it's because they have a bigger tenant pool, just like anything else, really. So what is the manager going to do for you? What is the owner's purpose and responsibilities? Extent of the manager's authority, how much money, that's really frequency of reports, how much money can they spend without calling you and getting your written permission? And that could be $500 in an emergency situation. If there's water pouring all over the shower head fell off and you can't turn the water off and blah, blah, blah. It should be an emergency. You don't have to call you because you're going to pay for it anyway. But if it's something a little bit different that can wait a couple days and it costs $2,000, just spell it out. It doesn't matter how much you're going to pay them. Obviously, a good bookkeeper or some kind of accountant of funds and what's going on. That allocation of costs, liability. Have real good liability insurance plan, and it's more if you have a hot tub. Antitrust provisions. I have a note on that. I guess antitrust provisions just actually as a property management agreement would have something to the extent of they can't get together with other property management companies and start boycotting and price fixing, just like realtors. And some kind of an equal opportunity statement. You've all seen that thing that says we're an equal opportunity landlord. Again, you cannot discriminate against protected classes. Okay, we good? Anybody have any questions? I feel like I'm going a little bit too fast because I asked you to put the hold, but we're good. Any questions here? Nope. Okay. Property management responsibilities. What is your plan? I want to know how you work, what you're doing. I want to see your financial reports. When you're at my house, I would like to see what the neighboring houses are doing. I would like basically some sort of market analysis that you're going to give me, because now I'm actually the client, right? I want to see what your operating budget is, cash flow, income and expenses, variable expenses, profit and loss, and budget comparison statement. Important to note, you can also, that's just common sense, financial reports are imperative with property management to track funds that are being received and where they're going in terms of property, including maintenance, repairs, deposits. As there's no current regulations, property owners should request transparency to protect both their own interests and those of tenants. When I work with an investor or somebody who does not want to sell the house and is leaving the state, it's one thing if they're going to be right down the road, but God, for anybody who's ever had an out-of-state rental, just say no. They will come to you and they will ask you for recommendations on who to hire as a property manager. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn now, but I have found that it is a constant battle. It's not regulated enough in this state, and just like every other business, there's some really good ones out there and some really horrible ones out there. When you get into vacation property like weekly rentals in McCall, Sun Valley, Coeur d'Alene, that sort of thing, it's a great way to sell property because people want to buy a second home, but they'll put it in what's called the rental pool, right? You know what I'm talking about. That's how you rent a condo in Coeur d'Alene for a week in July. Horror stories are coming out the woodwork. Obviously, I was in a resort for 17 years, and we heard about which companies were renting the property out and not telling the owner and splitting the proceeds amongst the employees. And I found it very hard to believe because I am been accused of being a naive Pollyanna. But at a certain point, I'd wake up and smell the coffee. And I had recommended a property management company, some clients, and everything was great for a couple of years until the owner, who was a ski boat rat, had a big show in Boise and decided to run up to Sun Valley, and there was somebody living in the house and he wasn't getting paid. It's just unbelievable. And I'm not picking on property management companies necessarily, you guys. There's crap going on all the way around with everything right now. Last night after class, I turned on the ABC Evening News and they were talking about yet another scam. Somebody that got his, I guess I knew this, I just wasn't paying any attention. Don't have your logon saved on your iPhone. Because anyone can come along, everybody's phone is sitting out in coffee shops on the table. Was to stop somebody from taking your phone and walking out before you even realize it and then emptying your entire bank account. I know, now I'm getting off topic. The scams out there are so crazy now, I can't keep up with them. All right, I'm on page 147. We're gonna set the rental rates and we're gonna do the marketing, the advertising. Where do you advertise? What do you do? We're gonna collect the rent and then spell out what your half is and how much I'm gonna direct deposit in your account at the beginning of every month. Just spell it out. This is an agreement between me, the landlord, and the property management company I hired. As far as the leasee, it's going to spell out the time and form of payment, any provisions for penalties, late fees, cancellation damages, blah, blah, blah. Maintaining the property manager must balance the service requirements of the property and costs. Physical integration of the property must be protected, and that is preventive maintenance, repair or corrective maintenance, routine maintenance, construction or tenant improvements, and hiring employees versus contracting for services. If you guys do have plumbers, electricians, carpenters, and all that kind of stuff on staff, I know a lot of the bigger ones, is that going to be an asset or deficit to the owner? Just a bunch of questions to ask. I don't do property management. I won't even do my own houses anymore because I just don't like it. Other people just thrive on it. And quite frankly, if you want to build a property management business, I actually had a student in my class 4 years ago who was taking the class with no intention of ever selling real estate. She wanted to know more about the whole process because she wanted to start a property management business. And guess what? That is who I hired. And she said, you're willing to take a risk on me, who's never done it before, in a brand new company. And I said, I know your character. I've had you in class for 2 weeks. And I'm telling you, the next 4 years were just loads off my shoulder. And she cut me a special deal because I gave her a chance. And I also give her referrals all the time too. She's just the best. So anyway, how you pick one, I don't know. Do you want to do it yourself? I don't know. It's a little bit more out of the scope of this class. And but how much do you need to know as a realtor? Investors are really good clients, you guys. I mean, they are. You might write 10 offers to get them one property because they want a killer deal. And they'll keep writing offers until they find one. But the truth of the matter of fact is you find a loyal one to you. And that is bread and butter and the icing on the cake and the gravy and the whole thing. But you've got to recommend good property managers and really keep up with what they're doing. I met a lot of them through networking groups. Do you guys know about networking groups? One of the biggest ones nationally is called BNI, which is Business Networking International. And basically you meet once a week. It's usually in a restaurant. For breakfast or lunch or something like that. A few of them did happy hour at a Mexican place. I thought that was kind of funny. Hard for me to talk about business. Don't order a margarita till the meeting's over or whatever. But it was actually kind of fun because you got to know the people on a little bit more personal level. And as far as trusting people and knowing that they're honest and ethical, sometimes that's a better way to get to know them. But anyway, you have to show up once a week. They're very, very strict. You can't just blow it off unless you're in the hospital. You really get to know each other over the course of a year, 2, 3 years. I didn't have one in Sun Valley, so I started one and I didn't get any deals for 2 or 3 years. And then I started getting 2 sales a year, which is well worth it. Made really, really great friends who are still friends today. It disbanded after about 7 or 8 years because people lost interest and I got referrals up until the time I left Sun Valley from it. It is a great way to network with other people. It's generally one per profession, meaning there's one residential one residential realtor and one commercial. And then you might find a property manager and a lender and a title person and a carpet cleaner, and it just goes on and on and on. You get 20 people together, and there's a lot of leads going back and forth at the lunch table every Tuesday or something like that. Great way to have 20 people to ask. Do you know anybody that wants to buy or sell a house? That's why they joined the group, for Pete's sakes. Great way to do it. Plus you have their email and their phone number and their mailing address and what they do for a living. It's just a
Building a
thought.
power team.
It's a power team. God, I always forget that word. Was that Nick? It's a power team. And you know what? Quite frankly, you have to have a power team, because people are going to ask you, who should I call for a lender? Never ever recommend just one if you can help it. Lenders, I would say 2 or 3. Call all 3. You want to have a power team. You want it to be able to say, here is a list of my preferred. You can hire anyone you want. I'm a little bit on the sensitive side when it comes to lenders, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, because there's some really bad ones out there that will ruin your time, your life, and your stress, and not be able to close the loan. So if you pick one that is not somebody I've ever heard of or worked with before, I would like their name and number, and I'd like to interview them too. And I will give you a straight opinion on what I think. Okay? Is that fair? It's pretty fair. Let's do the quiz and then take a break. Tenant and landlord agree on an oral lease for 3 years. Where is E? Lots of luck.
See?
C, it's unenforceable. You feel a lot more comfortable with multiple choice now, I hope, than you did a week ago. Everybody goes, ah. A tenant and landlord agree on an, oh, I just did that one, unenforceable.
No,
Just
the,
did
the
it.
answer was B, right?
Very funny. Sally's apartment lease has expired, but the building owner agreed to let her stay in the apartment until the owner's parents, who are in the process of selling their house, are ready to move in. The tenancy held by Sally.
Estate at will.
Absolutely, you guys. You can almost do that by plucking out all the red trucks and that kind of stuff. But I have a note on this. Oh, just that an estate at will gives the tenant the right to possess after the terms of the lease. Okay, type of lease. Oh, sorry. Which type? You know what? Something's not right here. There is a missing. Oh, maybe not. Type of, you don't mind if I sit here and chatter to myself, do you? The type of lease agreement where tenant pays a fixed amount of rent and the landlord pays all of the building's expenses is called what? That is always on a test.
Okay.
A is an apple. I don't know an easy way to remember that other than just to memorize it. I never found a trick to it or anything. It's just a residential lease.
Did
It's
we
called
miss
a-
3?
I
This
think
is number
this is-
3. Did we miss number 3 on page 148? This is number 3.
is, I hope to God you guys can see number 3 or I'm really messed up here on the
No,
PowerPoint.
You're right. Mhm.
Oh,
That's
because
what we
mine
are
was
doing.
4. Now it's back to,
Is that, we are
3.
doing number 3.
Yeah. Well, mine went to 4 in my book. Was that
Okay.
question?
You don't have number 3 in your book? On page 148, 1, 2,
I
3.
do, but it's on the page prior to the one we just did.
Do you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5?
But it's fine. Just go ahead. I got it.
Thank you.
But they were just in different orders.
Which of the following lease agreements would a landlord be least likely to use with a retail tenant? Least likely. They're usually not that nice to make it all caps. It's
Gross?
gross. Absolutely.
I love that B and D are the same.
Property management agreement typically includes what?
A,
You have got it. So, hold on a second before we take our break. Okay, yeah, let's, go for a 10-minute break. Is that good, you guys? Okay. Lisa, how's it going today?
Really good, very fast,
You what?
very fast, but really good.
Oh, man, it is a lot of stuff.
It is, but I'm keeping up, I think, which is amazing to me.
Oh, stop. Silly. Silly. Guys have a long couple of weeks. Is everybody going to mod 2? I know usually a couple people drop out and go do something else, or a couple of people drop in or doing their thing and whatever. Everybody coming back in a couple of weeks? It's nice that we have a break.
I'm doing module 2 in December.
Oh, you're picking the weekend up in December.
Yes,
Oh, well, we're gonna miss you.
I'm
you
pretty
sure?
sure. I'm pretty sure.
Really? You
Yeah,
just couldn't fit it in.
I talked to Liam about it early on. I have some possible conflicts in the rest of October.
Bummer.
So,
I mean, it's fine. It's all good. I know, it's all good.
will
so
you be
how
back?
do you go to
Will you be back in December?
Oh, yeah. First 2
Okay.
weeks of December.
Yeah, exactly.
That'd be good. It's a good time to sit in class. It's kind of dreary and
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
pretty sure that's going to be the way. It could clear, but I don't think it will.
oh,
Barbara-
you're still kind of open for October then?
Maybe. Slight
Okay,
change.
I got it.
Are we allowed to audit future cases or future classes?
Just because you just will miss me so much?
So if I don't feel ready to do the exam at a certain time, or if my
Oh, I
whatever
see
reason.
what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, gosh, that hasn't come up with Liam. And that's really interesting because it probably depends on the number of students, because at some point we have to have a second moderator. We're not quite there yet. So that would be something that has to be cleared with Liam. And just to refresh your memory, say hi, Remy. Hi, Remy. You all know why the moderator's here, correct? That was somewhere in your registration information. If you have technical difficulties, please private message Remy. That's why she's here. I can't really interrupt the class to help, nor am I any kind of computer techie. So do remember that is why Remy's there. If you're having issues with cameras or something like that. Okay. I don't know why you would be. I don't know how often the camera fails in a personal computer, but or the sound or
Just
everybody else.
internet.
Why would your internet be failing?
It happens.
We live far out in the country and we don't have,
My town when I live in Winnemucca, Nevada, and it's in the middle of nowhere,
Yeah,
and
up
it
to
is
date.
terrible internet.
What about your Verizon hotspot? Do you have that?
fiber. Yeah,
I do,
yeah,
but
that's
it's
what I
not
hooked to
5G.
when I went off today.
What?
Mine isn't either.
Well, I don't, at a certain point, I mean, talk to Remy about it. At a certain point, you might have to go someplace with better internet because we can't interrupt the class because of that. You know that, right?
Right.
Okay. And a Verizon hotspot is a wonderful backup. If you have to put it on unlimited for a month, so be it. They'll charge you another $20 or something like that. And I don't use it that much. I just use it as a backup when something does happen. Because wind blows it over and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so that is that. I think what we're gonna do next here is go through the appraisal CMA review PowerPoint, and then we'll do fair housing, and then I'm gonna do a grill and grill. Sound good? That'll be fun, huh? Everybody loves a grill and grill. Oh, I messed up, didn't I? Why did I mess up? I know why. Why is that little? I don't know. Why would one of them, see now I have techno, why would one of them come up little?
I think at the bottom of your PowerPoint, the bottom right,
The little dial.
Oh my God, you're so smart. That is totally, oh, wow, that is really cool.
Brilliant.
That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Okay, let's go through this one. Okay, an appraisal. Remember, it is, yes, you have to know that, memorize it. Opinion of value based on supportable evidence and approved methods. An appraisal report, that was the appraisal. An appraisal report is opinion of market value on a property given to the lender or client with detailed and accurate information. The appraiser is the person themselves, the independent professional trained to provide an unbiased estimate of value in an impartial and objective manner and according to the appraisal process. Comparative market analysis, CMA, is prepared. Also, it could be called competitive. I noticed that one of your textbooks, probably the National, calls it competitive. Prepared by a real estate agent, a comparison of prices of recently sold properties, those that are current on the market for sale, as well as those properties that were on the market, but the listings expired. These properties are compared to the subject property, one that the realtor intends to list. The comparable should be similar to the subject in terms of location, style, size, and condition. How far out do you go? How far do you need to go out? Quite frankly, if there's a ton on the market in that subdivision, I wouldn't go out of the subdivision. Generally, there's really not. So I might go a mile around the subject property. In Meridian, a mile is usually enough. Then I'd go 2 miles, and then I'd go 5 miles. If it was farms and ranches, you might be going 30 miles or something like that. But it has to be somewhat comparative, and you have to get a certain amount of comps. Broker price opinion, remember, it's like a quick CMA done for a fee. Check with your broker, and you can't do it unless you have a broker's license anyway, but the purpose could be something that doesn't even require a full appraisal. It could be a line of credit on your current home or something like that. Value definition is the power of a good or service to command a certain price or value in the marketplace. In the real estate terms, this is the amount of money deemed to be worth of the property. When determining value, a property must have the following characteristics: dust, demand. How many buyers are there out there? And what are they demanding? Utility. What can the property legally be used for? Scarcity and transferability, remember, is the ease of which we can actually transfer it, and that could have to do with the interest rates, whether or not the house is in a condition to get a loan on it, et cetera, what the terms are really. The basic principles of value. You know what, for some reason, I'm noticing that this got cut out of our manual. And it's not on this test, but I'm really glad we're going through this because I know it's on the national test. That is bizarre. I'm gonna make a note of that though. Principle of anticipation. Hold on a second here. You know what? I think it's actually in mod 2. I think they divvied up these CMAs. Oh, well, that's fine. Anticipation, what might or might not happen. How on earth would that change the value of property? Well, I'm going to tell you how it does. Because if you're showing 2 houses and one of them backs up to another house, you know what's going to be there, right? The other one in the same subdivision, the same house, and backs up to farmland. That actually can devalue the property that you're showing, because what might or might not happen to the farmland behind the house is a pretty big deal with most people in this day and age. I almost would take the house that already had a house back there rather than trying to. The anticipation actually may cause it to devalue more than what is actually ever built there. You're listing a piece of property next to a vacant parcel. Could it be a park, a big box store, a apartment complex, another single family house? It's the fear of the unknown affecting the value of the property you're listing. Don't let anyone say, but it's not zoned for a big box store. Because we all know it could be by noon tomorrow, right? Change, nothing stays the same, economic or physical. Future potential for zoning changes, floods, fires, et cetera, et cetera. Competition, that's nothing more than the interaction of supply and demand. I really don't know who that is, but I do know that the difference between first and second place in the Olympics is a gold medal versus a silver medal. And that could be 0.001 of a second, couldn't it? It's just, competition is fierce. If senior housing is needed in a particular city, it will be in demand if there's currently not enough. Then what happens is one project gets wildly successful and several other builders or developers try to build more. What would the result of that be? Then you've got a bunch of empty senior housing because the builders, yeah, you got it. And I see this over and over and over. I'm not trying to toot my horn, but I wish some developers and builders would simply call a bunch of realtors and say, what do you think is needed in the next 2 years? But some of them, no offense, anybody, some of them do have a little bit of, oh, that's mine, so they'll come. If I build it, they'll come.
They probably did that, all got the same answer, and now it's flooded.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. Anticipating what is going to happen in a year or two is an art too. Conformity. Is the property in harmony with its surroundings? The maximum value is created when a property is in harmony with its surroundings. I know that there's some kind of a test question about a house being in the middle of something just totally cooking. Oh, it was a shopping center. And somebody said, oh my God, I would be in love with that house. Well, I wouldn't. I don't want to live in a shopping center. You get it. Contribution. A part is measured by the effect of the whole, as in a swimming pool. Does it add or decrease? Depends on where it is, right? Highest and best use, the most profitable single use to which a property may be put. A house on Main Street versus a 10-story condo. By the way, it must be physically possible and legal. For those of you in Boise on the corner of Front and 9th. One of them is a high-rise condo called the Aspen Lofts. It's the one with the all-glass towers, sits above PF Chang's, okay? And they have beautiful there's a couple levels of parking, and then there's 4 or 5 levels of studios. They don't have as good of views. Then the 2 stories, I think, start on the 6th, 7th, or 8th floor, or something like that. I mean, the 2 bedrooms, the bigger units. So obviously, the higher you get, you're overlooking the center on the Grove and getting a beautiful view. The Capitol is in your face, the foothills in your face. It's just incredible sunsets, blah, blah, blah. My question is, when you're on the 7th floor there, overlooking the center on the Grove, I look at the center on the Grove and say the corner of Front and 9th is probably some of the most valuable commercial property in the city of Boise. Why is it a 1-story? Just think about that the next time you're downtown, you guys, and what is preventing that from ending up being 20 stories? Because I don't think that the developer of the Aspen Lofts bought the air in front above the center on the Grove, but it is a 1-story right now. I don't know. Probably take 20 years of battling city planning to change that, but who knows? Increasing and diminishing returns. The amount that you upgrade a home only increases or decreases the property's return up to the property's maximum value. At what point do you stop upgrading? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, you guys. But you all know somebody who's done it. And they keep saying, oh, I know, but I just love to do it. And I just did it. And it just makes my house so pretty. And then they want to get all the money back. And you need some objection busters for that. Just a second. Increasing and diminishing. I guess I made this a little bit too big, didn't I? Where is that little bugger again?
Lower,
Why can't I find it?
lower right.
Nine on the
Lower.
bottom.
Where it says 100%.
Glasses. I am not seeing it at all on my
Well, your screen
screen.
is probably too big, Barb. If you hit the escape, maybe it'll lower it. So your screen is on full.
I know. Sorry, guys,
You were-
just a second.
You were almost there. It's that lower right-hand corner with the plus and
it.
minus bar.
Give the computer challenged a hand. Okay. The law of increasing return says the money spent on modeling increases the value, but the law of decreasing return says no matter how much you spend, it's not going to increase the value in relationship to how much you spend. That right there is a very good argument for getting an appointment with people sooner than later. I know you're thinking about selling your house in a year, and a lot of people start home projects thinking it'll sell better. I'd love to come over and tell you what I think you should spend your money on. Good. Get in the house, get the appointment. Plottage, remember that merging two properties makes the value greater than if each were sold separately, because you've got two 6,000 square foot lots side by side. But if you get all 12,000 and merge the two properties, you can build an apartment building because that's what the zoning says. Regression and progression, building a high-end home in a neighborhood of less valuable homes reduces the price of the new home, and that is called regression. That would be the house, the little castle on the right, being built in a neighborhood of little ones like the black and white one on the left. That is regression for the big castle. And the other way around is building a modest home in a neighborhood of higher end homes increases the value of the new home. Progression probably doesn't make the neighbors real happy, but so be it. Regression and progression, remember that. Substitution, exactly how much would it cost to purchase an equally desirable and valuable home? This is actually the basic principle of the sales comparison approach, also known as the market data approach. Remember, and that is what realtors will use most of the time. Comparison sales approach, it is the principle of substitution, period. Supply and demand, what else is on the market? What is the supply of the product? When supply increases, the prices go down. And when supply decreases, that's the only house right there on the hill, the price is going to go up. I know I'm harping on this, you guys. And I know you know exactly what I'm talking about, even though I'm harping. And I'm probably harping because it's always on tests. And I'm not talking about the one tomorrow. I'm talking about national and state. And I think people get so, it's a test. I don't know. I don't, and you're looking at this and you're thinking when supply decreases and there's only one house, that's just common sense. That's not even anything you really need to study if you read it, right? You know what I'm talking about. So don't get all hung up on the fact that it's now put into a multiple choice test. Okay. I guess maybe that's why I'm harping on it a little bit.
Toilet paper,
What?
the whole
What'd you say?
toilet paper fiasco. There was
Oh my
none.
God.
Then you're paying $700,000 for a roll.
I mean, that was nuts. Absolutely crazy. God, that was nuts. Let's not go there. The sales comparison approach, also known as the market data approach, an estimate of value is determined by comparing properties around the subject property, which have already sold. I am going to use actives and pendings too. The sales comparison approach, the elements are property rights. This is some stuff that you have to figure out. Is the full bundle of rights included? Remember, if there's a life estate on that property, I gave you the example of it's a 96-year-old whose 3 doctors has said you have less than 6 months to live. And it would be 500,000. I might pay 485 for it, I suppose. But it's if a 50-year-old is living there with a life estate, I wouldn't buy it for $1. It just does me no good. So is the full bundle of rights? Is there any caveats in the deed? Financing concessions, buy downs, owner carry terms. We haven't gotten to the chapter on financing yet, We'll talk about buy downs and how we're buying down the interest rate. And you will see it in half the ads on houses for sale, that the seller is willing to buy discount points to get your interest rate down a little. It's helping a little bit, but anyway, conditions of the sale. Was it a foreclosure? A 1031 with a time limit or a parent to a child? What exactly is the deal here? Remember, a 1031 has a time limit, and that is 45 days to identify the replacement property after the closing of property number 1 and 180 days to close on property number 2. The proceeds from the sale of property number 1 can never touch the person's hands or bank account. It has to go through a tax exchanger. What about the market conditions since the date of the sale? We are in a real debacle right now, aren't we? I am wondering if it's still going down. I think it is. Anybody want to put in their 2 cents on that one?
Totally going down.
Well, let me tell you something. If a major builder is increasing your commission from 3% to 4.5, they're freaked out about their inventory right now. They're sitting on way too many empty houses.
Barb, what are the days on the 1031 again?
45 days to identify property number 2.
Yep.
And from the sale of 1 and 180 days to close. In reality, guys and gals, I can't imagine why you aren't identifying as many as an exchanger will let you the day before you close, not 45 days after, and closing in 2 days after. It's just nuts. There's just too much room for error there. But teach his own. I just don't like paying taxes, but whatever. I'm silly about that. Location, which neighborhood or part of town, obviously. You try in a similar location. Physical features and amenities, the age of the property, the size, the condition, et cetera, et cetera. So property rights, what is it that you're actually buying? If it's vacant land, can you build a house? That would be kind of an interesting thing to see, wouldn't it? What can you do with that vacant land? If it is improved, the property fee simple. Are there any easements on the property? Could that devalue your property? Absolutely. Like I said, in my neighborhood, there's public easements in every cul-de-sac to get from the street to the bike path. And I know there's been 2 sales in there since, well, I've had the house for almost 15 years now, but the buyer didn't know it prior to moving in. That people could walk by the side of their house to get down to the river. Hello, is the property restricted in any way from the full bundle of rights? Financing concessions. Can be good or bad. Doesn't qualify for an FHA or VA loan. It's going to make the price go down because you're cutting down the buyer pool. I'm going to offer it to you at 2% financing. I think you'd all pay more for the house than it's worth. I'm not going to do that. It's just a good example. The market
Yeah, what you said, sorry about that, the seller concession there that you mentioned.
Yeah.
When it comes to the sales comparison approach, that comes to an adjustment as a line item on the appraisal thing, as you mentioned. Because if there's a concession, it affects the purchase price, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't remember where the line is on the actual legal. I'm sure it's on there. Because it has to be, you know what? It has to be like for like. And if one is offered a 2% interest rate for some stupid reason, like the owner is a goof, when the going rate today is 6.7, there's absolutely no doubt that the one at 2% is not a good comparable. I mean, because that's just, or adjust accordingly. It's a huge deal there. How does supply and demand really affect the value? Well, $100,000 at 4% is 473. So a $300,000 loan there is what, 1,400 something? The $300,000, this is every 100,000 at 6% is 589. What did it just go up? Close to $300 a month. You guys, this is amazing. You know what's really interesting like that, and this is just a barbism type of thing. since what, for 10 years now, the feds are going to raise the rates. The feds are going to raise the rates. The feds are going to, and that's all we've been hearing, and they never did. And it's so long overdue. It's pathetic. And they did it all at once. I have no idea what to say about that, but it's no big surprise. Conditions of the sale. Do we really know all the motivational factors? Was this actually an arm's length transaction? Was this a parent selling the home to their child? Now, when you're looking at sales and you're trying to do a CMA, and you see something and you got, God, that looks like a nice house, and you go through all the pictures and you drive by and it's got a great lot, great location in the neighborhood, blah, 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 blah. And you thought they should have gotten more or something is weird. Call the agent and just say, hey, Joe, this is Barb, and I am doing a CMA in the XYZ neighborhood where you just had a sale. And I am thinking my house is worth more, but I'm seeing yours and it only sold at $475. Anything you can throw in there. And maybe there is something in particular that you couldn't see about it. Motivational factor particularly. Now, whether or not that's confidential client information at that point, I don't know, because I don't know exactly what we're talking about, but it may be as simple as they just did not want any grief and aggravation. They wanted done. And they were willing to take $20,000 less than I advised them to take. Fine. I mean, whatever. You can call the other agent and ask questions like that. Always have good working relationships with other agents and be nice to work with during the course of a transaction. The elements of the sale, market conditions since the sale date, I think we've harped on that enough. Location, different neighborhoods, north or south of the tracks. That could be, remember, situs is the public perception of it. I live on Rodeo Drive, or I live on Harrison Boulevard in downtown Boise. Well, then pay $100,000 more for my house because it's on Harrison Boulevard, which is really a public perception thing. It's a busy street, quite frankly. Physical features and amenities. Sales comparison, the value of a feature that is present in the subject, but not in the comparable, is added to the sales price of the comparable. Does that sentence make a remote amount of sense to you? If it doesn't, take a picture of it. I want to burn that in your head. Remember, you can never adjust the subject. You have to make the comparable as much like the subject as possible. So it's present. It's a value. It's a 3-car garage in the subject. What would have the comparable with a 2-car garage sold for if it had a 3-car garage? You want to make it look like the subject. So we will add to the comparable. The value of a feature that is present in the comparable but not in the subject is subtracted. All right. Here are 3 houses. And yes, this slide, believe it or not, guys and gals, is 2 years old. When those houses were $450,000. In June, they were high 6s. They're probably still in the 6s, 630, 640 or something like that. Still pretty good appreciation. The subject property on the left is 4355 South La Porte. I did go through all of these houses. I don't remember them clearly, but my notes said incredible backyard and outdoor kitchen. I actually took a class through, because they were all 3 empty. And that became harder and harder. It must have been 3 years ago now, because nothing was on the market to show the class. So you're not missing anything by being on Zoom there. We all walked into La Porte and we walked straight through the house, through the great room, and went out to the backyard. And we all just stood there with our jaws open. They had to have spent $75,000 in the backyard. I mean, the outdoor kitchen was, they probably would have gotten all the money back in Southern California or Arizona, but in Boise, outdoor kitchens are not quite as in demand as they are in southern states. Anyway, this place it was a waterfall, and built-in barbecue and refrigerator was all built in, and rock work. And I mean, it was just insane. But it was 2,600 square feet, built in 2014, 4-bedroom, 2.5 with a bonus 3-car garage, single level. The next one was the listed at 449.5 and actually sold at 449.5. 2234 square feet. What was the one on the left? 2661. I would adjust that because that is a 400 square feet difference. Would I adjust at the price of the whole house? Well, the one in the middle on East Santo Stefano or whatever it is was 2,200. What is that? A couple $100 a square foot. I wouldn't have added $200 a square foot, which would make LaPorte $80,000 difference. Why? Because the subject had 2.5 bathrooms and Stefano had 3. What's the difference between 1/2 bath? It's a shower and a full, really. It had 3 bedrooms plus an office. The other one had 4 plus a bonus. It's not, they both had a 3-car garage, nice backyard and a water feature. I would not have adjusted $80,000 for the difference of the 400 square feet, because really and truly, they both had 1 kitchen and they both had 3 baths. And that is where, that's the big bucks in building a house. I might have done $100 a square foot, because really and truly, the extra 400 square feet in that particular case is nothing more than expanding the footprint. So each of the bedrooms in the office were another, I don't know, 75 square feet.
The year.
Where's the year? Oh, 7 to 14, I would have adjusted for that. Yes, absolutely. Not very much though. And then 3871 Capulet, I guess it is, whatever it is, was listed at 4.6. It's pending right now. We don't know what it's sold for. So we're just gonna go on the fact, it's not in this particular printout, but how many days on the market? If it's sold 2 days after the list date, I'm just gonna guess they got full price. If it was a month, it might be a little bit less. I also could call the agent and just say, I'm doing a CMA on another house. I'm not giving out the address just yet because I don't have it in writing and it's not on the market. Doing another CMA a couple blocks away. And I want to know, I said, I know you can't tell me the sales price. Is it pretty good? And most people will just laugh and say, really good. That leads to me, it was probably over 457.5 or something like that. Good enough for me, okay? It was built in 06. So again, I have an adjustment because my comp was 2014. It's 3.3 and a bonus. So my comp, again, my comp in this case only has 100 square feet more. I'm not sure I would adjust for that at all. But this one, the one on the left does have another bedroom. I'm going to give that a little bit, but a 4-car garage with an epoxy floor, that's a wow in this neighborhood. They love it. That is, oh my God, a 4-car garage with epoxy. I mean, people hyperventilate. You can't get them out of the garage when they see that. That's a big wow. It's a single with a bonus room above that 4-car garage and no back neighbors. And it's not in detail right there, but I'm assuming it faces something very nice. Okay. So what am I going to do over there? I'm going to have some minor adjustments all the way down the line, based on what I'm showing you right now. Okay. Price per square foot. Be sure you're comparing apples and apples. This makes me crazy with the price per square foot. What is that on the left? Porsche, I guess. And it's looks like a 1990 Suburban with a sale price of $2,500 on the right. Theoretically, if you're talking about size, the Suburban should be worth $200,000, right? Not $2,500. So be sure you're comparing apples to apples on the price per square foot. The cost approach, that was all sales comparison. The cost approach is the process of estimating the value of a property by adding to the estimated land, the appraiser's estimate of the reproduction or replacement cost of the building, less any depreciation. Chances are you're not comparing a 20-year-old house with new construction. That makes 0 sense anyway. Anyway, 5 steps of the cost approach. The value of the land, the current cost of constructing the buildings and improvements, the amount of accrued depreciation, deduct the accrued depreciation from the construction cost, and then add the land value back in. Determining reproduction and replacement cost square foot method is the cost per square foot of recently built comparable structures multiplied by the number of square feet in the subject. You know what? Let's get back to the subdivision that's all under construction. And that's a good place to use square foot method, okay? Because if it's the same builder and the same finish work, that's not half bad. Again, the fact that if it's 1,500 versus 1,400 and they both have 2 bathrooms and 1 kitchen, you're not expanding it by the whole amount, you're just expanding a footprint. So it's really shouldn't be as much as the actual per square foot of the finished product. The unit in place method is estimated based on the construction cost per unit of the building. The components, not as detailed as a quantity survey. If one's condo's kitchen costs 50,000 and so does the next one, this is getting up and above a little bit more than a realtor should be worried about or responsible. This is getting into a building situation. For example, a quantity survey method is highly detailed analysis of the cost of raw materials. You all know what a builder's permit looks like. It's what the cost of the building permit is. What is the water and sewer hookup? God, it gets expensive, doesn't it? And the index method represents a percentage of increase of construction costs. Boy, that's a hard one to keep up with in this day and age, isn't it? Depreciation, remember, is a loss in value due to all causes. Curable, the cost of the fix makes sense economically, and incurable, doesn't matter how much you're going to spend on, you just cannot recoup your losses. Like knocking out exterior walls and adding foundation and roof to make the master bath bigger is considered incurable. If you want to do it, that's fine, but physical deterioration, items in need of repair, the cost of painting the house will be economically feasible and result in an increased value of the property. The cost of fixing a cracked foundation while making the structure saleable, at least, doesn't really increase the value. External obsolescence. Wows. How many of you want to look at that? No one? Would you buy the house that looked at that? It is river. I don't think I'd buy the house. I don't know. If it was a $500,000 house and I was going blind and it was on the market for 75,000, maybe. I don't know. To each his own, right? That is definitely external obsolescence. There is nothing you can do about that view from that living room. Ugh. External obsolescence, also called economic obsolescence. Please don't forget that, caused by negative features outside the property. It could be environmental, social, economic forces. It's always incurable. There's just nothing you can do about it. Spending money updating the home will not be returned because of the nuclear plant next door, even if it has a beautiful kitchen. Functional, a loss in value from the market's response to the item. Curable, outdated design features. Harvest Gold appliances. Does anybody remember that? Actually, I've heard that green or avocado dishwashers now are a hot ticket on eBay. Whatever. People are too weird. The cost of the new appliances and colors won't increase the value of the home. I'm sorry. The cost of new appliances will increase the value of the home, or adding a bath to a 4-bedroom, 1-bath home if there's room to do so. Incurable, the cost of the cure is greater than the resulting increase in value. Knocking out exterior walls, that's what I just said, just to increase the size of the bathroom is definitely incurable. Straight line depreciation is something an accountant will take for an investment property. Economic age life methods, depreciation is assumed to occur at an even rate over a structure's economic life. Guys and gals, it was changed. Is it 29.5 years or 27.5? Anybody know that before I Google it? I don't want to say it wrong. All right. Straight line appreciation. Formula, real estate, how to calculate, what's the formula? I can't find it. And I do want tell you it. Why? Because it might be a test question. Um, Interesting that it is not in here. I will skip it in just a second, but I don't want to forget it. Okay.
According to realtymogul.com, it's 27.5.
Thank you. I knew somebody could do it faster than me. Thank you very much. Was that Napaduro? 27.5. That means when an accountant is doing your taxes and they're depreciating your investment property, they consider it to depreciate at exactly the same amount every year for 27.5 years. So if somebody calls you, actually, here's another great prospecting tip. You look on the tax records and some counties have it in the tax rolls and some don't without too much work. You find out you're looking at a house and you can see that they live in Arizona or Nevada or whatever. It's probably a rental property. And then you can see that they bought it in 1998. What is that, 24 years? They're coming up on not being able to depreciate it for tax purposes anymore. Might be a great idea to give them a call and say, hey, I know you've, is that a rental property at 123 Main Street? Well, the reason I'm calling is I'm wondering if you've given any thought to selling now that the economic depreciation is almost over. Or they will call you and tell you that. And I don't know that you have to actually memorize it's 27.5 years. Yes, you probably do because it's one test question out of 2,500. Don't stress over it too much. It's just one more thing. The more you know, the more houses you'll sell. That's all. The income method, remember, was the way to appraise commercial property. It is based on the present value to future income. What I pay for that house depends on how much I'm going to make on it. So it's the future income after it closes, and that's going to determine how much I want to pay for the house. The income generated by the property will determine its value. An appraiser must estimate the annual gross income, deduct an allowance for vacancy and rental loss. That's the effective gross income. Deduct operating expenses and get your net operating income there. Estimate the price a typical investor would pay, the income produced by this particular type of property, and get your cap rate. Apply the cap rate to the property's annual net and arrive at the property's value. Don't freak out. What do you have to know here? In a commercial real estate transaction, the appraiser would likely use what type to value the property? And the answer is the income approach, okay? You might get asked a question like, what would the property sell for? And you know, if two of the answers are 500,000 and 600,000, it's one of those two. Because you just read the question and it said, what should the property sell for? So it's got to be one of those two because it's not $1 and it's not 9%. That doesn't make any sense. So read the question and figure out what they're asking, and you can eliminate two of them right off the bat, and then either multiply or divide. And if you don't know the which to do, try both until you come up with, when you come up with a 500,000 or 600,000, that's probably going to get you the deal. Okay. I happen to know that multiplying anything by 0.08 is going to make it way, way, way smaller, right? Duh. Okay. Gross rent multiplier, remember, is a little bit of a quickie way for a residential realtor to help out an investor. The figure used as a multiplier of the gross monthly income of a property to produce an estimate of the property's value, used more in single family and duplexes. It's easier. It's not a full analysis. The sales price divided by gross rent is the gross rent multiplier. If you're interested in working with investors in multiple family like duplexes and fourplexes, Ask another agent and or your broker who you can talk to get more experience and that kind of thing, and what's a good deal and what isn't. Reconciliation is just using one or two, more than one way, and then putting them together, like the cost approach and the sales comparison approach. In appraising a commercial building, which method? See what I mean? That was a perfect example right there. I just told you the answer, didn't I? C is in cat, right? Okay. The amount of money a property commands in a marketplace is
Market price.
that is a hard question, but that is so typical. Commands.
Market value.
Well, God, I hate to tell you this, you guys, I'm not 100% on this. I am going with B. Gets. I'm going to take the word commands and say gets. What do you guys think?
That's why I said B. Yeah,
Oh, I think that's,
because it's a specific, it's an amount of money.
yeah, what does it command? What does it get? What does it return? Whereas market value is an abstract theory in essence. Yeah, I'm going with B. If a property's annual net income is 24,000 and it's valued at 300, what is the cap rate? Get out your calculators right now and do this. So, and I'm just going to say right now, I don't know what to do. Actually, I know I'm looking for a tiny little thing like a 0.0 something. So I probably am going to take 24,000 and divide it by 300. And hope it's one of the four. In fact, I got 8%. What'd you guys get?
8.
You got
Yeah,
what?
The number,
Did I
the
miss-
number's less than 10, the number's less than 10% of 300,000, so it could really only be A.
You know what? And that is there is means if it was the net income was 30,000, it would be 10, but it's not 30,000, so it has to be. Unfortunately, and that is very, very true. There are plenty of ways to do this by what makes sense. But I think one of the next couple questions is going to mess with your head on that one. Well, it'll come up in a second. The time period during which a structure shows income that's attributed to the structure itself is known as what?
A.
Economic life. According to the principle of conformity, their highest value, this is the question I was just talking about, is maintained by having a residence what? Somebody went, oh my God, I would love to live next door to a shopping center. Teaches them. How about D as in dog? Makes sense, huh? Okay. A property being appraised has a 2-car garage. The comparable has a 3. In making adjustments, what are you going to do? Give everybody 30 seconds to read the whole thing. And the survey says,
See,
he is in boy. If you honestly don't know, what did I just say? I'm sorry. C.
yay, I got one right.
You know, my brain gets fried too.
Oh,
Sorry about that, you guys.
The lower and the valuable of the comparable is the 3-car garage, because that's called the comparable. So you're telling us to lower the value of the 3-car garage?
Okay, let's go back. A property, I want to make sure I'm not in la la land here. A property being appraised has a 2-car garage. Is that the subject? Yes. The comparable has a 3-car garage. In making adjustments, the appraiser would what? The comparable has a 3-car garage. I want to know what the comparable would have sold for if it had a 2-car garage. It's less. So I would lower the value of the comparable. Okay. Make a note to study up if that's not clear, because it's generally more than one test question, okay?
And
And
you're not adjusting the price of
Eliminate B
the,
and D.
Yeah.
You can cut out B and D immediately because you're never going to adjust the subject. Okay? You know what? This is called lessons in how to take multiple choice tests, right? The highest and best use is the use that provides what? The greatest, I'm sorry,
C.
C, value. A house has been maintained like new, but its value went down 50%. How come?
Economic obsolescence.
You just had no choice. Yeah, it was something externally outside the house. Several $250,000 homes were built in an area where the existing homes were 8 or 900,000. The effect was the value of the existing homes decline. Which real estate principle does that apply to?
A.
A, regression, and you got lucky. Progression's not even there, and you knew it was one of the two, right? How to take a test. When appraising buildings such as hospitals, schools, and churches, an appraiser would probably use what?
C.
Right on.
Hmm.
Quantitative analysis approach, I'm sure it has some kind of meaning. To me, it's a red truck. If you've never heard of it, it's probably a red truck. Income, I don't know. Churches and hospitals could be not-for-profit. And how many churches and hospitals have had a similar piece of property sold in the last month right by it? None. What would it cost to rebuild it? So it's C. An example of external obsolescence would be what?
D.
D.
D is in dog. An appraiser would need to determine accrued depreciation when using what?
B.
B is in boy. You guys have this down, right? So no squawking or moaning. It sounds like you've got it totally down. Whatever. And a property has a net income of 30,000. This is one I want you to all take a minute or two. Get out your calculators and figure it out. Property has a net income of 30,000. One appraiser decides to use a 12% cap rate. A second uses 10. What is the result? I'm going to be really frank with you guys. Some of you can see that just by reading the question. I
feel
just
like it's
don't
a
have,
trick question.
it's not. It's a classic example. If you go like this,
Is it A?
how did you come up with that? Is that what your calculator told you?
No, because you're 2%. The higher rate is 2% more than the lower.
Would it not make more sense to get your calculator out and figure both ways? Would that be an easier way to solve this, Amanda?
Probably be a better way than staring at the question.
Staring at the question and going, oh, that's 2%. That doesn't make any sense. Get your calculator out and see how quick you can do it. Actually, I can see that 30,000 divided by 10 is 300,000 to begin with. So do 30,000 divided by 12%.
C?
That is correct. How did you know that? Because you just got your calculator and punched it in 10 seconds or less. Okay, I'm gonna harp on something. No, you can't throw tomatoes at me, ha ha ha, because I'm not even the same house, the room as you. Why not just get your calculator out and figure it out? And I'm not picking on anybody. Every class does it. They look at it like it's like gonna come out of the screen and attack somebody. Get your calculator and do what the calculator says. I'm dividing by the percentage. If I multiplied, I'd have numbers of like $300, which makes no sense in the value. So I know it had to be a division. That was my example of get your calculator out and figure it out instead of trying to do it in your head. With an annual net income of 40,000 and a cap rate of 8, the value of the property using the income approach is what? What are you going to do here? First of all, somebody tell me what you're going to do next. You have your calculator out. Anybody? Come on, Lily. You're just dying to. I can just see it.
I already have,
Multiply.
What?
I got C.
How did you do it though?
40,000 divided by 0.08.
Pretty easy, huh? Yep. A seller agreed to sell a home with no money down and below market interest rate. I would actually call that not of sound mind. But the favorable financing could be expected to affect the what?
A.
A. Value is still the value, but the price is going to change. In the cost approach to value, it's necessary to know what?
C.
That is correct. I don't know why they keep throwing in answers that has how much the buyer paid for the original cost of construction. Who cares? Just know that if you have no idea what they're talking about, you can throw out 2 right off the get-go. Which of the following is not insured? We haven't gotten there. So I don't know why that's in there anyway. All right, so what do you think? Let's go to fair housing. That always gets everybody's blood flowing thin, mucky, or something like that. Fair housing, equal opportunity, etc., etc. What do I want to say about fair housing? Agents get themselves into trouble over what could be typically construed as making conversation. Unfortunately, we are going to see a video, but it's not that one. The Real Estate Commission, it was like 10 years ago, but I still remember it really well because I'm watching this video and I'm thinking, I could see myself. I couldn't see myself saying that, but it was so innocent by the agent. This woman meets with an agent and she said, I am looking for a townhouse or a condo. I want something. I have 3 daughters and I'm a single mom. The daughters are blah, 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 and yada, yada. If there's a playground, that's great. And I want something with no maintenance. That's what I want, an association. I'm happy to pay a maintenance fee. And this is the area and this is my spending budget. Okay, fine. So they agreed to meet on Saturday or whatever it is. And they're in the car and the realtor is driving and they get in the car after the first one. And the realtor says, so what did you think? The woman says, well, I really liked it, but I'm kind of thinking if I have a choice, and something comes up in that building, I think I might prefer ground floor because that was so neat that the girls could just run out and use the swing set and blah, blah, blah. Just chit chat. That's all it is. Just chit chat. They look at the second one and it's the same story. And then they look at the third one. And on the way to the third house, which was 10 or 15 minutes in the car, The realtor says, so where are you from? You know what? I ask people that all the time. So where'd you grow up? Where are you from? I think it's kind of kind of cocktail party talk. It's small talk is what it is, right? And there's nothing wrong with saying where you're from. And this woman says San Francisco. And they're in Boise now. And the realtor says something like, what brought you here? And she said a job transfer or whatever. Okay. And then she has a slight accent, and a slight accent probably means they came here as a child. I think it's kind of determined that if you came here over the age of 17, you have a fairly heavy accent. It's obvious that you weren't born in the States. So the agent says, where were you from originally? And she says, Vietnam. So far, that's still cocktail talk. And they're pulling in, now HUD, Housing and Urban Development, has testers out there. They will make an appointment with you on a Saturday afternoon while you miss your kid's game. And you will go show them houses thinking they're a bona fide buyer when they're a HUD buster tester. And the agent said, oh, wow, that's a coincidence. There's another family from Vietnam that just bought in this complex. That is against the law to say something like that. It's called steering because it's implying perhaps you'd be more comfortable living around people like you. And they busted her. Now this is a made for education movie by the Real Estate Commission, okay? So we're gonna get into what you can and can't say. And when we really get into it, you guys, and then block busting and steering and how it happened innocently enough and how to make sure you never do it, because a lot of federal fair housing violations are innocent. You just need to know when to shut up. Have I ever been in a comfortable situation? In Boise, it's usually religion. And I have learned when they start going a little bit deeper than I would like to answer, I have learned to say, I'm really sorry. But because of federal fair housing laws, I can't answer that question. But I will tell you, just go online and see where the nearest Catholic church is. And I think you should call the priest because that's not my gig. And I usually say, I'm not Catholic, but even if I was, or Mormon or LDS, I mean, whatever, it doesn't make any difference. I can't talk about it because of federal fair housing, it could be construed that I'm trying to steer you towards like kind. Okay. So one time that was really specific with me, which led me, and I just talked to another agent afterwards and I said, I didn't know what to say. She said, where do the Mormons live? And we were going north on Linder. I'll just tell you what it is for those of you who don't know the area.
Can you say Utah?
No, I was in Boise. I was going north on Linder between Chinden and State. And she said, where do the Mormons live? And it was a beautiful sunny day in Boise. And that gold steeple was like almost blinding. I mean, it was right there at the brand new temple. And I said, well, actually, and she started laughing. And she goes, I can't believe I didn't see that. I knew there was a new temple going in there. And then she rephrased the question. And I said, I'll be really honest with you. I can't even go there because of federal fair housing laws. That's something entirely. And she said, oh, Barb, of course. I'm sorry that I asked. And that's a good way to nip that in the bud. Obviously, race, religion, sexual orientation. I mean, it goes on and on. So let's go through the protected classes and how this whole thing came about and what you can and can't say. And basically, I'll tell you what you can say. Nothing. Ever again. About anything. If somebody asks you how many bedrooms are in the house, I want you to take a hunk of hair. I have a lot of hair. Okay. And I'll just take a hunk of hair and twist it. And I'll go, it's because of the blonde highlights. I don't know. I don't know. It's just like, what can you say? And actually, this is pretty funny, you guys. One of the broker classes is real estate law. And the instructor when I took it 25 years ago was a judge and attorney in Twin Falls, and he came up to catch him and taught this class. It was 30 hours, so it was what, 4 or 5 days, whatever it was. And he says there at the beginning, I don't know, there's 20 students in my class, and he goes, "Welcome to real estate law for your broker's license. Here's what you need to know. Don't open your mouth about anything ever again, or you'll get sued." He said, "Just kidding. What do you want to do for the next 29 hours and 52 minutes?" It's just hilarious. Sometimes I'm laughing because sometimes you feel that way with all the crap that goes on out there. Do the best you can. My goal here is to make you aware to shut your mouth, because some of this stuff really is kind of innocent. So we are on page 150 in your manuals.
What don't you want to talk about at the Thanksgiving table? That's what. That's...
Yeah, that's about it. Oh my God, I was with a bunch of girlfriends once, roaster. Oh yes, there was wine at the table. That's just fine. And we were talking about the hardest sock in the gut you ever got. And I said, "Oh, this happened to me. Oh, wow, that's terrible. Oh, this happened to me." And this one girl goes, "My sister bought a house from another agent." And we go, "What?" I mean, can you imagine? And we said, "I think you win. I just don't know what you win." And she said, "It kind of makes Thanksgiving a little uncomfortable." The truth of the matter is, whose fault was it? She didn't ever even explain to her sister how you work. That's your responsibility to get people to buy from you. All right. Okay, I'm having a little too much fun because I'm losing it. All real estate professionals must be aware of federal, state, and local fair housing laws. Failure to comply is not only a criminal act, it can also cause you to be fined or lose your license, obviously. Purpose of the laws is to create an open, unbiased housing market. All real estate professionals must be aware of federal, state, and local fair housing laws. Failure to comply with the law is not only a criminal act, I guess that's what I just said, but may also be grounds for disciplinary action. A little history. Believe it or not, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 said any race can buy, sell, lease, or convey, transfer, buy, sell real property. Look at the date on that. That was a year after the Civil War ended and Abe Lincoln was shot. Do you honestly think anyone in the United States followed that in 1866? Come on. But that was the law. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 said any race. You do not have to know these cases, but Shelley versus Kramer in 1948 was actually racial restrictive covenants. There are actually, I believe, did you know that I can open my mouth sometimes? I knew the listing agent. She is a really good friend of mine, but I was showing it was a new construction. So it was a large condo complex. And I pulled up the CC&Rs because my buyer was interested in it. And it said no Negroes allowed. And I went and I looked at the date, and in fact, I think it was 1952 or something like that. And I called her up and I said, I just pulled up the CC&Rs on this. Do you know that it says that? And she didn't. I don't know how you could not know that. And she did some research and found out the neighborhood association never changed it because an attorney wanted too much money to take it out. It has been taken out. But I know that that is not the only one. I guess it shocked me so much that an association could have let that gone on for 70 years and nobody had called an attorney about it. I mean, they called and said it's going to cost you $2,000 and they all said, no, we don't want to do it. How could that have never come up? And this was like in 2015, you guys. It is amazing to me. Anyway, Shelley versus Kramer, 1948. As far as racial restrictions in CC&Rs is when it was supposed to be done. And then there's the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The 60s were very, very turbulent, obviously. Prohibited discrimination in public accommodations, in federally assisted programs, and in employment on the basis of race, color, religion, or national origin. And that was when they could no longer separate bathrooms, restaurants, that kind of stuff. In 1968, racial discriminated based on race, color, religion, or national origin. Again, they added something there and I can't figure out what's missing from that, but we'll just go with it. Jones versus the Mayor case expanded the definition of race to include ancestral and ethnic characteristics, which is why race and color are both in there today. It is a different thing. The Rehab Act of 1973 prohibited discrimination against persons with disabilities in all federally assisted programs, including housing. We're going to get into what a disability is, because it's not necessarily what you think. Housing and Community Development Act of 1974 added gender as another basis on which discrimination was prohibited. Before that, ladies, we couldn't buy a house without our husband's permission. And I doubt that any single ladies were, I mean, I don't remember. 1988 Fair Housing Amendment Act added familial status and physical and mental handicap as protected classes. Familial status means you are either pregnant or you have children under the age of 18 living with you. That is familial status. How do you know someone is pregnant? And can you rent to an alcoholic? An alcoholic is a disability. Drinking alcohol is a different thing. Like I said, just close your mouth, put duct tape over it, whatever, I guess. Okay, fresh corn is just an acronym. Familial status, these are the protected classes today. Race, I don't know, Caucasian, African American, Indian, Native American, that's race. Sex or gender, that's not, are you having sex? It's kind of, are you male or female, and are you LGBTQ? Now, just a second, that is not nationally protected. I'll tell you a minute about that. Handicapped or disability being mental or physical, color, religion, and national origin. On page 163 in the Idaho book, I want you to look at the top half of the page. It says gender identity. Sexual orientation and gender identity are not protected classes under the Fair Housing Act. Law does not protect gays, lesbians, or other sexual minorities with discrimination in housing. However, in 2012, the HUD Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity issued a regulation to prohibit lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender discrimination in federally assisted housing programs. Anyone owning or operating a HUD fund housing complex cannot inquire about an applicant's sexual orientation or gender identity. 20 states prohibit housing discrimination based on sexual orientation. Idaho is not among them. Let me reread that just to make sure that we are really clear. 20 states prohibit housing discrimination based on sexual orientation. Idaho is not one of them. Boise City Code. A lot of Idaho cities have passed ordinances prohibiting housing discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity in the sale, purchase, lease, or rental housing accommodation. For example, under the Boise City Code, the penalty for a violation is a misdemeanor punishable by $1,000, blah, blah, blah. You're going to hear a lot of lawsuits that are coming up, and they are generally finding another way to sue and winning. It's a bone of contention with much everybody out there right now, I know. let's move on.
Can I add something, Barb?
Yeah, please do.
You'll notice where it says sexual
I put my-
orientation,
Yeah,
HUD
yeah,
2012.
yeah.
That means that any agency in Idaho that is getting funds under the HUD has
Yeah.
to prohibit discrimination. So it doesn't mean that it's not being, that they are being protected under the federal law here.
It is, I know.
Okay.
But the truth of the matter is, what about individual landlords? Actually, I'm gonna take this aside for just a second here. Do you guys know what a love letter is in the sale of property? And actually, we're up on the video right now. A love letter is stuff that we've been receiving a lot in the last couple of years because it's so competitive that the buyers wrote a letter that said, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's a picture of our family. Our budding little girls are active gymnasts and they can't wait to spread their yoga mats out in the rec room and show us everything they've learned. And here are these two little toe-headed blonde girls and their gym, blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah." And the seller gets 5 letters like that. And 1 or 2 of them is a gay couple with an adopted opposite race, whatever they are. Okay, here's a picture of my family. We love your house because ... And actually, even if the seller went with the best offer, regardless of any of that, agents were starting to be prosecuted under federal fair housing. The reason that you didn't take my offer because you knew I was gay. And so the Real Estate Commission came out and said, you know what, here's the deal. We are highly, highly recommending that you no longer take love letters. And if your client insists on writing it, please tell them why. And the listing agents, don't show it to your seller. I got a love letter, but I've been advised by the Real Estate Commission to not accept them or give them to you anymore because it's gotten into too many federal fair housing laws by who you are and the picture of you and yada, yada, yada. Do we need a break before we sit down and go get some popcorn and watch this lovely movie? Then let's take 10. Okay. Then we'll come back and watch the movie. Won't that be fun? Whew, it's a long day, isn't it? I lied. We're not quite ready for the video. You'll have another page in the manual, okay? Kyle, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Barb. How are you?
That's awesome. Really and truly?
Yes, ma'am.
You wouldn't lie to me, would you?
I wouldn't.
No, of course not. That was pretty silly. Hi, Chris. Alrighty. I guess just listen up for a little bit. I'm on the bottom of 154. What is a housing or dwelling? It's any building or part of a building designed for occupancy as a residence. Okay. Familial status, one or more individuals who have not reached the age of 18, living with a parent or guardian. I will say in there that the exemptions are HOPA, HOPA, which is Housing for Older Persons Acts, community where 80% of the residents and one per house have to be older than 55, or everybody has to be older than 62. All properties available under the same terms and conditions as for others cannot use advertising or occupancy standards with the intent or effect of restricting families with children. No children is a huge no-no. Disability is a physical or mental impairment or having a history of same that substantially limits one or more major life activities. This does not include the current illegal use or addiction to a controlled substance, nor conviction of the illegal manufacture or distribution of a controlled substance. So if you are addicted to crack, you are not covered, but if you're addicted to alcohol, you are. Whatever. Does protect the individuals in addiction recovery programs. That's nice. Does protect individuals who have AIDS. Landlords must provide accommodations and allow reasonable modifications that are necessary at the tenant's own expense. I'm going to add to that the tenant does have to restore it to its previous condition prior to the expiration of lease and moving out. Real estate licensees should consider any reasonable accommodation required. Reasonable requests are those that don't impose an unreasonable administrative burden, obviously an unreasonable financial burden. That's on the landlord. That puts somebody's personal safety at risk. Examples of reasonable requests may include flexibility in appointment times and meeting locations, including care providers in discussions or showings. You are not expected to lift someone who cannot walk up a flight of stairs. Obviously, it's just, let's be reasonable here. Oh, the next example, an unreasonable request would include physically carrying a client, driving through landscaping to improve accessibility. That's just common sense. Okay, movie time. Where is it? I hope we have sound. Can you hear it?
Working with individuals who have disabilities can create some unique challenges for real estate licensees. The Idaho Real Estate Commission has invited attorney David Penny with Kosho Humphrey Law Firm to discuss some common issues licensees may face in their daily real estate practice. Welcome, David. It's great to be here with you today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It seems like there's a lot of misunderstanding and maybe even some uncertainty when it comes to working with people with disabilities.
There sure can be.
Well, to help with this, we compiled a few situational questions we'd like for you to answer for us. Let's go ahead and jump right into those questions. Many brokerages are interested in helping make this process a good experience for everyone, but they aren't sure where to start. What can they do to make their services more available to people with disabilities?
That's an excellent question. Perhaps the single best thing an agent or brokerage can do is to have a very welcoming approach to people with disabilities. And it's really an approach to everybody because disabilities often are not obvious. And so an attitude of, how may I help you? What can I do for you today? And then having an open-minded approach to the response, I think, is very important. Under the law, the obligation that an agent or brokerage has really begins when someone makes a request for accommodation. And a request for accommodation is when someone asks for a variation or a change in a rule or a policy or procedure that the brokerage or agent might have, for example, in showing properties or conducting a transaction of some kind. When that request comes, the agent should be very willing to tackle that, kind of from I wouldn't say that every request is a problem, but it presents something that the agent needs to give some time and some thought and some effort as to how you would overcome that. And the obligation under the law is to respond appropriately to reasonable requests for accommodation. And a request is reasonable if it meets three criteria. It does not impose an unreasonable administrative burden. It does not impose an unreasonable financial burden. And it does not put someone's personal safety at risk. There's not, I believe the language is immediate risk of harm to someone by accommodating the request that's being made by the person with the disability.
That's great advice, David. Using your approach, if a real estate agent receives a phone call from a person in a wheelchair who wants to see some homes, what should the agent do when the home is not wheelchair accessible?
Again, a very good question. One of the points that arises from that question is who should be determining the properties that are going to be shown to this client who in the phone call has indicated that they're wheelchair bound. And usually that's a decision best left to the client to let them decide what properties they want to see. And it's not a responsibility of the agent to look at the properties and decide what would or wouldn't work for somebody in a wheelchair. It's usually going back to that very welcoming approach of saying, how can I help you? And what can I do in my power as the agent to make this opportunity to view property a good one for you, one that you'll enjoy, one that will be complete. Because at the end of the day, it's to meet the needs of the person with the disability so that they have an equal opportunity as someone without a disability. They may say, oh, I'll be fine, I can walk with a cane and I'll be able to go up a flight of steps. That won't be a problem. Others perhaps not. And so using our test on what is or is not a reasonable accommodation, in this setting we could see a couple of things that might develop. One of them, the client might say, well, my expectation is that you'll take my wheelchair to the top of the steps and then you'll carry me up and put me in the wheelchair. That is not a reasonable request for an accommodation because it changes the nature of what a real estate agent does, and therefore it would be an undue burden to have to assume the safety of somebody and actually carry them up a flight of steps. Another alternative, though, maybe the person says, well, I've got my cane, I can go around on a limited basis, all I will need is for you to just offer me a stabilizing arm so that I have 2 points, one my cane and two your arm, and we'll be fine. An agent might say, well, that is a reasonable request. I'd be more than glad to do that. I do it with my grandmother all the time. And so they're very comfortable doing that to help them view a house where there might be accessibility challenges. In some situations, an alternative may be to videotape the inside of the house or the parts that are not accessible to the person in the wheelchair so that they can look at them and see them. And of course, we all know today with our cell phones, you can shoot a pretty decent video that the person could then see. Simply because a house isn't accessible at the time they view it doesn't mean that they can't come back later if they purchase the house and modify it with lifts and ramps and various things so that the house may be their dream home after they're through modifying it.
So regarding what you said earlier about a reasonable or unreasonable request, who makes that decision? Is it the agent?
Well, yeah, it's the agent trying to decide, is this something that presents an undue burden, for example, or something that is a reasonable request. Just because a request requires more time or more effort or a de minimis expense doesn't necessarily make it unreasonable. It's when they're undue. For example, carrying somebody. That would be an undue burden. When it's a personal strain, places the agent perhaps at risk of injury, assuming a tremendous liability, trying to carry somebody, that would be unreasonable. And so it really is going to be a case-by-case assessment by the agent. The key for the agent is to try and help solve the circumstance, to knock down the barrier or minimize the barrier created by the disability.
Okay, so let's say, for example, that a deaf couple comes into a real estate office looking for a home. Is the agent required to hire someone to assist with sign language?
Well, we go back to that same approach that we had talked about before. The person who is deaf often would make a request for accommodation of some kind to help overcome the barrier that they might have. So the agent then has to make some decisions. What would be a reasonable approach to overcome that barrier? One of the factors certainly that would be considered is what is the cost of having the person who can assist with, for example, sign language. Another question is, well, what else could be done as opposed to having someone come in and actually help reduce the barrier that's created by the disability? For example, someone who is deaf can use visual means such as a shared computer screen or something in writing or photographs, that type of information, to be able to learn about a property or view a property. So in that setting, generally I would say, no, you would not be required as an agent to incur an expense to go and hire somebody to sign for the deaf couple. If the transaction goes deeper, though, they want to discuss the details of a transaction, make an offer on a property, and if there's minimal cost of having someone sign, it might help facilitate the transaction to actually have somebody involved. In that circumstance, it might be reasonable. Now, if you do hire the interpreter for one person, the question that I very often get is, does that mean I have to hire an interpreter for the next person and the next person and the next person? And the short answer is no, it doesn't. Each request for accommodation stands on its own, and the agent has to consider that request and what would be appropriate based upon the needs of that particular client.
Okay, David, so it seems like it might be a good idea when the situation justifies the expense. Would you recommend the broker create an office policy that addresses this?
While a policy by the broker isn't required, it might be a good idea to have a forward-thinking statement that expresses that the business and its agents are committed to working with people with disabilities. You're not required to adopt a policy. However, if you do, the policy should probably be created with the input from either a disability rights advocacy group or an attorney to make sure that it's correct under the law.
So as you know, a big area that people seem to have a lot of questions about is service animals. Let's say a salesperson has a prospect that brings a dog with him wherever he goes. He says it's a service animal, but he's never seen it do anything but sleep. He really doesn't want this animal shedding in the backseat of his car, so what does he do?
Well, one of the important points raised in the question is here the agent is suspect or questioning whether this person perhaps has a disability and whether they need the animal at all. And unless the agent has gone through some legal training or training through an advocacy group on how to correctly ask that question, the better course of action for the agent here would be to just go ahead and accept what they're being told by the client, that they have a disability and that they need the animal to come along. Under the Fair Housing Act, most people refer to animals as assistive animals because you not only have the trained service animal, but you also have a comfort animal. And a comfort animal doesn't require any special training. They are often used to help ameliorate the effects of a disability that could be something, for example, post-traumatic stress disorder. So the best approach is to accept the fact that this person needs to have the animal with them and then address what the accommodation is so that you can accommodate it or that you can even propose alternatives. Here, it's some inconvenience, but the fact that a request for accommodation is inconvenient doesn't make it unreasonable. So a towel or sheet could be placed on the seat where the animal's going to be. Other alternatives could be proposed. One alternative would be, we'll take the client's car. The animal's already familiar with that car and just ride along, takes care of the shedding issue. And then lastly, the agent and the client could travel in separate vehicles.
That was great advice regarding service animals. We also get a lot of questions about certain breeds. For example, one agent had a buyer with a Rottweiler as a service animal, and they made an offer on a condo. The condo association says that their insurance company won't insure certain breeds, including Rottweilers. What should the agent do in that situation?
Under the Fair Housing Act, someone in this situation, like the seller or the insurance company, doesn't get to place a breed restriction on the service animal that the buyer has. So in this particular situation, to enforce that or to take that position may be a violation of the Fair Housing Act. It's very important to talk about the role of the agent in this setting. Perhaps the best approach would be to talk to your client and advise them to get some advice on the Fair Housing Act from either an attorney or a fair housing advocacy group so that they learn what their rights are. You're neither the attorney nor an advocate for the client in this setting, and it's best to refer them to a source that can give them the complete picture. As we step back from this question, I just want to make the point that under the Fair Housing Act, and we talk about assistive animals that could be either service animals or comfort animals, we're not just talking about dogs. Those animals can be a wide range, and someone, whether they're a seller or an agent, cannot discriminate against a person who has a disability that needs an animal that may be a reptile or a bird of some kind. Dogs are just perhaps the most common in what we see, but it's important to realize that that service animal, that comfort animal, that assistive animal can be something other than a dog.
That sounds like a great solution for the agent, and thank you for the clarification on service animals in general. I'd like to switch gears now and end with a situation about marketing. A client's home has a ramp and other wheelchair accessible features. She'd really like to market it to people with physical disabilities. I know that the fair housing advertising requirements are pretty tough. Can the agent market the property that way?
The short answer is absolutely, because the marketing requirements under the Fair Housing Act are to prevent discrimination against certain protected classes. People with disabilities are a protected class under the Fair Housing Act. So discriminating against them would be against the law. But it's not against the law to promote something that is a benefit or an attribute of a property that might attract people who have a mobility impairment, for example, from enjoying a particular property.
David, thank you so much for your time today. We've had a great discussion on accommodating reasonable requests, and you've given us some nice tips that will really help us all as we work collaboratively to make the home buying experience more accessible to consumers.
It was my pleasure.
As a part of this segment, a handout has been prepared that contains the key points from our discussion today, as well as information that can help to start a conversation with your broker and office.
What do you think? Should we start awarding Academy Awards? It gets crazy. I know it gets crazy. Is anybody having a sinker like I am? I have the perfect wake-up call. Turn to page 168 in your Idaho book. And that is advertising word and phrase list. Acceptable, caution, unacceptable. It makes me crazy. I think a good rule of thumb here is let's not talk about the people who might be attracted to the property. Let's talk about the property itself. Some of this is obvious. And some of it is absurd. But I don't think it's real estate. I think the world has gotten a little bit nuts lately. That's all it is. The airlines are going bananas over, is it legal to bring a 10-foot cobra on a flight? Because it just helps me relax, and I have a fear of flying. I don't know. I don't have an answer anymore, guys and gals. I really don't. It's I think it's watch your P's and Q's. So
Let's bring a peacock on a flight.
you knew I was a flight attendant. I had somebody bring a pet bird and went to pet it, and of course it got out of the cage. And really, I mean, come on. Yeah. I can't imagine that job today. I mean, it's just incredible, isn't it? Why are people so cuckoo? I don't know, maybe they're under more pressure, or I don't know what it is. It's pretty nutsoid. All right, let's finish up this chapter, do a little review, and call it a day. Alrighty. I'm on page 154. Oh, shoot. Why does it do that? Okay. Sale or rental of single-family residences. The sale of, this is an exemption. It's owned by an individual who does not own more than 3 such homes at any given time and doesn't sell more than one every 2 years. Basically, you're not in the business of being a landlord. A real estate licensee is not involved, and discriminatory advertising is not used. The rental of rooms or units in an owner-occupied 1 to 4 family dwelling. That's why you can obviously say female roommate wanted in 3-bedroom home at 123 Main Street. Dwelling units owned by religious organization. I have no idea why you can say Christian roommate wanted. I don't know. Private clubs are obviously exempt. You can say no women. Um, Housing for Older Persons Acts, that's the HOPA law. Like I said, that's a over 55 community. And Americans with Disability Acts. In HOPA, on the bottom of page 154, it's exempt if it's intended for people 62 years old and at least 80% of the units are occupied by at least one person 55 years of age. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. The Americans with Disability Act provides for non-discriminatory employment procedures and accessibility to goods and services by people with disabilities. Title I covers employment of qualified job applicants regardless of disability by providing reasonable accommodations. Title III, excuse me, covers accessibility to business goods and public services. Rental owners and property managers should be aware of these provisions and inclusion of comfort and support animals. Most people who are in this situation volunteer. I've had pets come and wait in somebody's car. I've never had anybody say, I get really stressed out when I look at houses, so I have to bring my Rottweiler if you're somebody else's house. It's just never happened to me. I guess if somebody is not proficient in English, they usually bring their own interpreter. It's generally a kid or something like that with them. They don't expect me to hire an interpreter. But with that said, it's one thing to be looking at houses when they are not 100% proficient in English. But when it comes to actually writing an offer, I don't think I would do it without an interpreter. I want them to understand the contracts. What else is in here? Okay, federal fair housing issues. Blockbusting, steering, and redlining. I know you need to know it, okay? So blockbusting, inducing homeowners to sell by claiming negative impacts on property values from the entry or prospective entry into the neighborhood by people in one of the protected classes. This was so big in the 60s, guys and gals. I remember it. Because you know how when you're little and you're not sure if your mom and dad are fighting or not? And I was kind of concerned. I guess I was sensitive in that. I don't know. Everybody's afraid their parents are going to get a divorce when they're little. I don't know, whatever. At least they were in the 60s. Now it seems to be the norm. So blockbusting was named white flight. And what happened was real estate agents were going door to door in subdivisions and basically knocking on the door and saying, hi, my name is with XYZ Realty. Here's my card. I wanted to let you know that three-eyed Martians are moving into the neighborhood and that is going to devalue properties. I think you should list with your house with me and I will find you a new one before the property values fall. What they're doing, if you want to take it literally, is they're going chop and trying to bust up the block. And that's why we called it white flight. What I remember happening when I had to have been 6 or 7, I believe. And this was in a nice area in Seattle. And it was Caucasian. There's no doubt about that. One of these realtors knocked on the door. My mom was the stay-at-home mom, and she's very, very upset. And after dinner, when the kids go to do their homework, is when mom and dad talk. And I could see it was getting to be a really serious conversation. And I just kind of went up and I said, is everything okay? And my dad said, she's old enough to understand if you want to sit in. And I'll tell you what happened today is real estate agent knocked on the door when mom was home by herself and told her that we have to sell her house because you know that house down the street that had a for sale sign on it. And I went, because I walked by it on my way to school. And, well, the people that bought it is a mixed racial couple. And I said, what's that? And he said, one is white and one is black. And I went, oh. And my dad proceeded to tell my mother that if it ever happened again, to tell them to get the H off our front porch and away from our house and never knock on this door again. And that was that. That was the end of it. And so later that evening, it was obviously the second or third weekend in October. This is how innocent kids are, you guys. I said, can I still go Halloween trick-or-treating at the house? And my parents said, of course you can. It's no big deal. I think that I was concerned because my parents were so upset about the whole thing. And now I learned about this, 20, 30 years later in real estate. And I realized that is what happened all over the place in the 60s, white flight and blockbusting. Steering is channeling buyers into or away from a particular area based on race, color, religion, national origin, or other protected classes. The effect is limiting choices. It's back to the lady who said she was originally from Vietnam. And the realtor said, oh, how interesting. There's another family from Vietnam that just bought here. It was really kind of a flippant but it was construed as steering, because literally you're taking the car and telling the client, perhaps you'd be more comfortable here with like-minded people or like race people or like something or another, when in fact you should never ever tell a client, perhaps you'd be more comfortable over here. It's hard. It's very hard to keep your mouth shut. And then you have to go back and say, what is a protected class and what is not? Do you think I should live in Eagle or Cuna? That question is not so much about race, color, religion, etc., as it is about a little bit more economic, maybe. God, what am I trying to say here? And I'm not trying to avoid anything, you guys. It just you really have to say, am I trying to avoid a protected class? Okay. All right, advertising, we talked about that. Using language that indicates a preference or is discriminatory is prohibited. Exclusive neighborhood. Well, that's not really excluding anybody, is it? English speaking only I guess it could indicate discrimination based on race, color, or national origin, when in fact an exclusive neighborhood to me means wealthy snobs. Or, I mean, do you know what I mean? Kind of something like that. English speaking only is a completely ridiculous thing to put in a real estate ad anyway, because it has absolutely nothing to do with the house. Perfect for a young family or bachelor pad could indicate discrimination based on sex or familial status. I know there have been a ton of lawsuits on defining what is a family. To me, it's myself and potentially a dog. I mean, other people think it's somebody with 2.5 kids. Other people say it's extended family with the grandparents. I have no idea. That everybody construes all that kind of stuff different. Bachelor pad, does that mean a single woman wouldn't like it? Are you discriminating because I'm female? Oh my God. You also must be conscientious when using landmarks for directions. Using a church as a landmark can indicate discrimination based on religion. Never, ever, ever in an ad should you say just down the street from the Catholic Church. Period. Just don't do it. Even though it's a building, it's really not a religion. Catholic Church is a building. I don't know, you guys.
So Barb,
yeah, go ahead.
if you say that the house is down the street from McDonald's, are you being discriminatory against vegans? Like, you should just refrain from that altogether.
Vegans are not a protected class.
Thank you.
Okay.
You gotta remember who is the protected class here.
Yeah, not yet.
You know what? Very well put, because quite frankly, Go back to number one, C1, exclusive neighborhood or English speaking only could indicate discrimination based on race, color, or national origin. But what language I speak is not a protected class yet. Boy, is that ever right on. Anyway, illustrations or pictures that only showcase one class may be problematic. Stereotypical identifiers, that is not just in federal fair housing. I've noticed it in a tremendous amount of advertising. If they're advertising a new subdivision, they will have Caucasian or non-Caucasian and put that stuff in the ads just showing. But it's in furniture ads and everything anymore. Everybody's very sensitive to all this stuff. Advertising cannot consider factors related to the protected classes when preparing valuations or appraisals. It's kind of just obvious. Red line is another thing that you have to remember. Refusing to make mortgage loans or issue insurance policies in specific areas for reasons other than the economic qualifications of the applicant. Red line, you know, those circles that are red circles and there's a red line. Think of it in terms of a red circle with a red line. I'm not going, this is for mortgage lenders, not realtors. I'm not going to lend in that neighborhood because it has a higher foreclosure rate. Why does it have a higher foreclosure rate? Could that be construed to say it's got too many three-eyed Martians living there? Yes, it could. When in fact, it's, I don't know, it's economics, really. I mean, well, it's not. You absolutely can discriminate. If you don't have a job and you don't have any money, a lender doesn't have to give you $1 million because how much money you have in the bank and whether or not you work is not a protected class. The intent and effect, without intention to discriminate, certain activities can have that effect. All right, and response concerns of terrorism. This is something they knew, they just added. Landlords and property managers need to take care that security procedures designed to protect against, okay, that makes total sense, terrorism do not violate fair housing rights. Let me read that again. Response to concerns of terrorists, landlords and property managers need to take care that security procedures designed to protect against terrorism do not violate. You know what? I'm glad they added that, guys and gals, because quite frankly, that is huge today. And about 10 years ago, I dated a guy who was born in the Middle East. Very respected citizen in the community, just a really neat guy. Had an accent, Middle Eastern, obviously. Right after, he told me what was going on after 9/11, and it was just heartbreaking. He was so discriminated against. Everybody thinks I'm a terrorist. I was in Israel right before this class started at the end of July, and I talked to Israelis who have been to the States, and they say, I hate it there. And I say, why? Because everybody thinks I'm a terrorist. And I thought, you know what? It would be really, really hard. It would be really hard. Response to concerns of terrorism. I can see why they added that. That is getting to be ridiculous too. I don't know what to say, guys and gals, other than exactly what my attorney instructor in real estate law said. The next time somebody asks you how many bedrooms are in this house, take a lock of your hair if you have any, twirl it around, shrug your shoulders and say, I don't know.
I have a question.
I don't think number of bedrooms is a protected class yet. Go ahead, Lisa.
Number F, intent and effect. It mentions the effects test is applied. And I found one online that applies to credit reports. Is that what they're talking about there? Effects test?
What was that?
Number F on page
No, I'm
156.
yeah, certain
Oh, sorry.
activities can have effects test is applied. What did you say again? I'm sorry, Lisa.
I don't know what the effects test is, and on Google it says it's under the equal opportunity and applies to credit. denials.
Okay, that is very poorly worded in our manual, but yes, actually that is also falling under redlining. Redline is a neighborhood. You know what? Thank you for bringing that up. That makes that, lenders certainly. I know this, we're talking about federal fair housing, but lenders definitely cannot discriminate based on any of the protected classes. No doubt about that. All right, how do we enforce this? Office of Fair Housing Equal Opportunity under the direction of this created HUD is Housing and Urban Development. Yes, they do have inspectors out there. I have never had the pleasure of having that happen to me, but a gal in my office in Sun Valley did, and she hadn't been skiing. You know what? We moved to Sun Valley because we're all skiers, and you got the perfect powder day in February with a brilliant blue sky, and these people come and she does her buyer questionnaire online to see how serious they are. She decides to bag the skiing that day and show them property, and they were egging her on. And she finally pulled the car over and said, "You're HUD inspectors, aren't you?" I don't think she said, "Get out of my car or I'll shoot you," but you said you just ruined the best ski day and I haven't been up for 3 weeks. Thanks a lot. Now get the hell out of my car. Anyway, it is what it is, right, you guys? Let's not talk about civil penalties and actual damages. Just remember to shut your mouths, because I heard a statistic once, I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's something like 85% or so. It's something huge. Fair housing complaints and lawsuits are really started very innocently, and you can kind of see how that might happen. So that is that. Okay. Which of the following acts prohibits discrimination on familial status? Oh, come on. You don't really have to know that, do you? You know what? And here you do amendments to the 1968 Fair Housing Act. I wouldn't stress too much about that. I will go over the test in just a second and figure that out. This you do need to know. If a lender refuses to make residential real estate loans in a certain area solely because of the area's racial makeup, what's the deal?
C.
Redlining. Does that make sense to everybody? Because I know that's always on every test. Okay. Which of the following actions would most likely be legal? Legal. Okay.
B.
B.
B. You guys are really reading the questions. I'm impressed with you. I really am. It's great to meet you guys. Is it because I've hammered you unmercifully? The Fair Housing Act of 1968 is enforced by, that's an easy one because they really all are.
A.
D. D.
Okay. Housing and Urban Development. All right.
What was the answer to one again?
God, what was
A.
one?
A.
It was A, but don't fuss too much about it, okay? Okay, get out your scratch paper, please. I am doing what's called a grill and drill. I know you guys have heard this more than 3 times. I'm not trying to bore you to tears. But I actually had somebody on a test. Here's the question. How many square feet in an acre? I know you know it. How about 43,560 already? What's bigger, a section or a township?
Township.
How many sections in a township?
36.
And how many square miles in a township?
1.
In a township?
Just kidding. 36.
I fell for it. That was pretty stinking good. Oh, there's another one I want to, and what is the section designated for schools if there's only one in a township?
16.
That is called grill and drill. You can't not know it by this point. 640 acres in a section. 160 and a quarter of a section. Don't forget that if a question has a half, not a quarter, remember to half it. A half of a quarter section is 80 acres, for example. I think that's enough about that. What is the oldest form of a legal description? It would be meets and bounds, where monuments are points of reference, either natural or man-made. Riparian rights give landowners certain rights with a river on their property, whereas littoral rights are generally a larger body of water. If a realtor was doing a CMA or an appraiser was doing an appraisal and they used 2 or more methods, and one being the sales comparison approach / also known as market data approach, the cost approach, and the income approach, if they used more than one of them to come up with a number, it's called reconciliation. Okay. Did I mention that? Of course I did. You know what a trade fixture is. You know what a life estate is. You know that a tenant in common is the way to go when it is more than one person that owns. And it does not have right of survivorship. That's a joint tenancy. So a tenant in common, you absolutely can leave it to your heirs in a will. All right. You know the difference between servient and dominant tenant holder in an easement. I know you know the difference between a co-op and a condo. I know you know what the bundle of legal rights is and the doctrine of prior appropriation. Long song and dance question about just a second. Where are they going with this? Okay, I'm just going to rephrase the question. When you're with a client and they sign documents, when do you have to turn it into your broker?
Next business day?
End of the
Let's keep
next
it
business.
simple. Thank you very much.
What?
Yes. The end of the next business day. Correct. I don't want the number, but if we know that 640 acres are in a section and there's 36 sections in a township, what would you use your calculator to figure out acres in a township?
640 times 36.
Absolutely, you guys. Failure to account was one of the duties that we owed a customer or a client according to the agency blue brochure, right? Failure to account for monies or possession that a client puts in our I just can't talk anymore. Possession. That could be an earnest money check. It could be keys. It could be when you're showing a house, failure to lock the doors and windows when leaving a property is really failure to account for taking care of somebody's property. So the term failure to account is money and property and things that they are entrusting you in your possession. All right? You know that though. An appurtenant runs with the land. It's a right, privilege, or improvement maybe. Running with the land means it generally transfers with a sale. We haven't gotten to lead-based paint yet. That is tomorrow morning. If you want to go through any of this tonight, go through land use controls, that zoning laws, and hazardous materials, lead paint, formaldehyde, radon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We'll do that in the morning. Again, you're a customer until you sign a written representation agreement. That's the only thing in the state of Idaho that transfers you from a customer to a client. You still owe the customer certain duties, honesty, fairness, properly account for money, and being available to receive and present written offers and counter offers is a duty that you owe a customer just as much as a client. You're never really expected to independently inspect the property for hazardous substances or faulty electrical work or anything. You're not any of those things. You're a real estate agent. Just a second. I think I mentioned that a compensation agreement is not a contract. Well, it is. It says if you accept this offer, you'll pay me. Okay. And I would use that if I was selling it for sale by owner or something like that, that isn't a listing agreement with a cooperative brokerage. You still owe certain duties with somebody you're working with as a customer. Okay, enough of that. Mechanics liens. What about them? If they have not gotten paid 90 days after the work is completed, they can file a lien against the real property. Okay. And the contractor has 180 days to bring that to court. Somebody asked if that's renewable or not. I don't know the answer to that. I would imagine if it can't get to court for some reason, they're busy or something like that, I suppose you could extend it, but I don't know that for sure.
Is the 180 days from the completion of the job or from the filing of the lien?
Good question. But it says page 116, and I am going to assume that is in the national book, but it is not. I'm sorry, it's your manual that they're referring to. Page 116. Check out what they have to say about that.
It does. I don't think it mentions the 180 days.
That is true.
I
No,
see
it does. It does. It does. Number 6, Idaho Code blah 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 states that the mechanics liens
there
are
we go.
binding for a period of 6 months unless legal proceedings have been started. Okay, fair enough. So that's after you file the lien, and it's good for 6 months. Okay. You probably know that single agency is 2 different brokerages, right? Dual agent is 1 brokerage and 1 designated broker. Have you heard that before? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Know the difference between with an assigned agent. Remember, that's 2. Without, you're the deal. Never disclose confidential information. Confidential is considered something not a public record that a client has told you in confidentiality. Does it matter if you're a customer or client? Yeah, it does. You don't have to take that information to grave for a customer. Are you feeling okay about all this, everything I'm saying so far? It's just knowing these. I hope you're making notes. If you know, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Statute of frauds is a law in Idaho code that says how things are done, and we're talking about now. It has to be in writing and signed by both parties to be a contract for the sale of real property. Could somebody shake and hug and kiss? Of course they could. It's just unenforceable in court. Not highly recommended there. Government powers are police powers, eminent domain, escheat, and taxation. Does everybody remember what escheat is? If you die without a will, the property escheats to the state of Idaho after 5 years. It supposedly is supposed to be going to the public school fund. That would be nice. Gross rent and gross income multipliers are an easier way for residential real estate agents to figure out what's a good investment in a duplex or fourplex or whatever. But it is also kind of a variation of the income approach. A lease option is the buyer's option. Okay, the seller is bound. And a sale and lease back is when the seller becomes the tenant after closing. I've harped on that enough, haven't I? What is steering? It's suggesting to a home seeker that perhaps they would be more comfortable over here. A net lease is something, a gross lease is going to be residential. A ground lease means you're leasing the property underneath whatever it is you're buying. A net lease means you might be paying one thing that's not real standard for residential leases like taxes. And triple net lease is almost exclusively commercial. But, excuse me, the tenant is paying taxes, insurance, maintenance, and utilities on the building. There's exemptions to Federal Fair Housing Act. One is it's my own house and I can advertise, I can discriminate sex when I'm advertising for a roommate. A private club has that exemption. Housing for older persons. I'm trying to think of more exemptions to the Fair Housing Act, to know a few of them. We haven't got into zoning and variances yet, if you want to study up on that tonight. Annexation has a twofold meaning, just like a lot of words in the English language, quite frankly. Annexation could be that somebody's asking you to annex and be incorporated into city limits for various reasons. It also could mean that you are taking personal property, like lumber from Home Depot, and constructing a deck, which you're annexing from personal to real. Severance, remember, is taking real property and turning it into personal property by chopping the tree down and using it for firewood. You remember all that, right? FEMA flood control, we'll get into in the morning. Do you remember tenants in common and joint tenancy? Review those. Okay, I don't think you know that, but a real estate offer is a purchase and sale agreement. It has to have what? It has to have a date. It has to have timelines for contingencies. It has to have buyer and sellers or any principals to the property. It has to have their signature. It has to have a legal description of the property. I'm missing one. Sorry, I'm blank right now, but I
Did you
read
say
you the
beginning
answer.
and-
Would it be the
did you say
price?
beginning and end date?
The price, thank you. Good God, freeze. Thank you. That would make a huge difference, wouldn't it? Remember when somebody wants to continue as a customer, that's completely fine. You are a non-agent. Remember when you're checking those boxes? You know, certain things have exemption from property taxes. Kind of not for profit. What would that be?
Schools, churches.
Churches,
Parks. Yeah, you get the drift there. Okay. Do you know what external obsolescence is? Think it doesn't have anything to do with the property. There's not a lot you can do. Whereas functional obsolescence is public's perception to the property, like no master bath or when you can barely turn around in. And physical deterioration is just really lack of maintenance. Do you remember in legal descriptions, the meaning of datum? It's elevation. So remember, a condo or a co-op is going to have in their legal description, it's going to be some kind of in-lot or something like that. Oh my gosh. Remember the duties set forth in the Brokerage Representation Act? They're kind of in the agency disclosure brochure. And if you don't have anything better to do over the next few weeks, guys and gals, you might read that a couple times because you are going to have to regurgitate it in Mod 2, okay? I know I've said this, but I'm going to say it loud and clear. The legal descriptions we have are the rectangular survey system that is also known as the government survey system. We have meets and bounds, and we have subdivision plat maps. A subdivision plat map also might be referred to as a recorded plat or just a plat. Okay, I know I've said that at least 10 times, and partly because it's irritating me that they have to use all three in tests, okay? So subdivision plat map could also be called a recorded plat or just a plat. Lis pendens is Latin for lawsuit pending. Amendments and addendums are adding something after the fact. It's a fully, it's a legal contract. It's in escrow. Now we're going to start plowing through some of the promises that we made, and we want to change something. We've done the building inspection, and the buyer basically says, I will go through with the sale if you will, blah, blah, blah. So we fill out a form that says the seller agrees to replace the broken window in bedroom number 3 prior to closing. And that becomes an addendum that attaches to the purchase and sale agreement. You know that a mechanic's lien can also be attached to material. It doesn't, mechanic insinuates it's a human being, like a laborer. Material and liens means it could be the lumber from Franklin Lumber or something like that. I think you guys already did this 18,000 times in one of the PowerPoints, that if it's a really bizarre, like a special purpose type of property, and that would be schools, hospital, what else? Libraries, churches.
cemetery.
There's a reason they never come up for sale. There is some legality that says they can never sell them or something like that. Anyway, you'd use the cost approach because there just aren't any comps around, right? This was up for debate yesterday, and I want to make it real clear that what I say right now is the way it is because I'm reading it. Okay. I did tell you that when the owner carries the contract, that basically means that the owner is the bank, right? And it can also be called a land sales contract. That's owner carry. So legal and equitable title. Legal title in the case of a regulated financial institution means that you have legal title. You are actually on the deed, even with 0 down. What does the bank have in that particular situation? They have a lien against the property, really. It says you own it. But you owe me $500,000 on a sale of 500,000, but you're still, legal title is in your name. It's the opposite, and I know this is not all the time, just go with me on this and don't argue it, okay? I'm giving you the answer. On a land sales contract, or when the owner the owner is the bank, the owner, let's just call it me. I am going to keep the title in my name until your final payment, just like a car, at which point I will give you the title then. So what do you have in the meantime? If you just gave me $100,000 down and you're making 30 years of payments at 5%, which is a great deal, it's 6.7 now. You have equitable title, you have all the rights and privileges. It's just, you don't have the legal title in your name. That is just the way we're going to go right now. If anyone here does not know that you can have an oral lease unless it's more than a year, then I can't help you. If it's more than a year, it has to be in writing. And an oral lease is always going to be pretty much unenforceable in court unless you have witnesses. The term erosion and avulsion, I know that seems like 100 years ago, but it was actually just a week ago Friday. Erosion is the slow process of wearing down the land, like the action of the ocean on rocks, whereas avulsion is a sudden tearing away. It's pretty much what just happened to Tampa, Florida. That would be considered avulsion. The flooding, the winds, everything, the landowners had lost portions of their property, right? And that would be avulsion. It's a sudden act of nature, really. A subdivision means dividing land into 5 or more parcels. I know that there are a lot of out there that aren't 5, but that's the legal definition of a subdivision. We haven't talked about receipt of a property disclosure yet. Did not know it was in this section. That's a mod 2 question. I will tell you that the property disclosure is something that the seller fills out when they list the property, and it's a few pages of, has the roof ever leaked? Yes. In 2018, during that hailstorm, it blah, 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 and I hired Sammy's Roofing, and here's the receipts, and he's guaranteeing it for umpteen years, and blah, blah, blah. That's fine. Has this ever happened? Has this ever happened? Does the heater work? Does the air conditioner work? All the way down the line for pages and pages and pages. What about it? A buyer has 3 days after they read it to send it based on that. So they have 10 days to get it to the buyer. I say don't do that. I say upload it with your listing and let the buyer's agent download it and do it with the offer. Why take it off the market for 10 days when the buyer's going to say, I didn't know you had a leaky faucet that you fixed 5 years ago? So the answer is the buyer has 3 days to rescind their offer based on that. Redlining. Anybody want to define redlining to me? I know you're
lender,
I'm tired.
Discrimination of what areas that you won't write a mortgage or insure.
Drawing a red line literally and saying, I'm a lender and I am not going to loan on a piece of property in that neighborhood, regardless of your ability to qualify for the loan. Whoa.
Number 2 in the questions.
What questions?
And in that section, page 157, number 2. Redlining.
Uh-huh.
I was just saying that to remind.
Okay. Okay, everybody. I can't think of another thing right now. Is that good news to your lovely heirs?
I need a clarification on something.
Oh, Lord. You're asking me after 3:30 in the afternoon. I'm sorry. We're going to have to put it out to the group. What's going on, Nampa group?
Okay, there was a question back there about a 3-year oral contract being unenforceable versus illegal?
Would it be unenforceable because
I can't
they
think of
could-
how.
What is illegal about it?
More
Nothing.
than a year?
I mean, if you want to kiss and hug and go through with it, it's not illegal. I don't remember the specific question. I would say, is it illegal? No, I agree with you, Lisa.
So
if you want-
it's 3 years, it's 3 years a red truck, basically, is that?
If it was about oral agreements for real estate, yeah, it was. Yes, that's a good analogy.
Okay.
Unenforceable in court.
Okay,
Kind of
Okay,
like
sorry.
voidable, kind of like voidable. If one of them wants to come forward and say, forget it, it was oral. But if both go forward with it, there's no issues, right?
Thank you, because I am so tired of talking, you guys. Thank you. Anything else? You guys talk away. Not a thing? What kind of game are you going to, Chris? What's your kid playing?
He's playing football.
No kidding. Whereabouts?
Well, we're in a very small town called Battle Mountain in northern
I do not
Nevada.
know where that is.
Not very many people do.
They definitely have the best gas prices. If you need to fill up there.
How much? Cheap, huh? Okay, you guys, I can't think of anything else. Tomorrow we're going through zoning laws. What was the other? That's land use controls and hazardous substances that you need to be aware of and what you reasonably should know and yada yada. Have a great night. We will see you tomorrow, okay?
Do you have an
Goodbye.
approximate time that the exam will start?
Yes, thank you. I don't like to start between 2 Pacific and 3 Mountain. And it's only 50 questions. You can, you need 70% to pass. You can miss 15. Come on, you guys. When you're done, you're free to go. Remy is the actual one that administers the test, and she'll send it out, and it's a link. And she asks you to clear your desk and all that kind of stuff, okay? I just can't think of anything else. Okay.
Thank you.
Sleep tight. Hey, you guys, are we having like too much fun? Can you believe we're at the end of mod 1 already?
Is the test timed?
No. Well, that's not really fair. I will sit here for 3 hours. After that, I'm kind of going, what's the problem?
Okay.
Okay, I'll talk to you later. Most people take 45 minutes to do it,
Have a
maybe an
good
hour.
night.
So. Yeah, you too, guys. Bye.
Thank you.